At the tender age of 8, Myrtia underwent a magic aptitude test, a pivotal moment that revealed a devastating truth. She possessed the lowest grade of magical ability. Her own father, a man of stern judgment, deemed her utterly useless, a fact she felt compelled to conceal. Without hesitation, her father pointed a dismissive finger, commanding her to vanish from his sight. As he turned away, she desperately reached out, her voice a soft plea for him to wait. Just then, her mother stepped forward, placing herself protectively between Myrtia and her father. She declared that Myrtia possessed the highest magic and intelligence among all her siblings, asserting that even if she could not wield conventional magic, her unique talents would undoubtedly find their rightful place. She continued to address her husband, her gaze firm, explaining her unwavering belief that Myrtia would prove invaluable to countless individuals. Her voice carried a clear challenge as she questioned his intent to cast their daughter aside. With a pained yet resolute expression, she delivered her ultimatum. If Myrtia were to be expelled, then she, too, would abandon her public duties and disappear. His eyes widened in a mixture of shock and fury. The father's face contorted as he struggled to comprehend her defiant declaration. Despite his reaction, she remained steadfast, her gaze unwavering as she reiterated her resolve. Her hand firmly grasped Myrtia's arm, pulling the young girl close in a protective embrace, a silent promise of unwavering support. The scene then shifted, revealing the sprawling, picturesque cityscape of the magic kingdom of Elmira, a place of advanced magic and new beginnings. In the rigid structure of noble society, a child's magical aptitude was the paramount factor determining their future. The ability to wield magic served as the ultimate measure of an individual's excellence. Nobles, driven by an unwavering desire to safeguard their family names, became fixated on producing heirs with exceptional magical talent, thus elevating bloodline itself to the highest value of a person. Her fate, however, was sealed by a different outcome. The results of her magic aptitude test revealed she possessed only the lowest grade life magic. Though her mother's fervent plea had spared her from outright expulsion, she, a child with no hidden magical talent, found herself confined to an obscure and forgotten basement. While she remained in the dim solitude of the basement, her mother joined her, offering what comfort she could. "I could only prepare this place for you," her mother explained gently. "It is a dark basement, but many books from the previous head of the family remained here." The young girl, however, quickly interjected, "No." Her eyes welled with a mix of gratitude and burgeoning hope. She understood that her mother had painstakingly gathered countless books for her. This was not merely a confinement. It was a sanctuary, a place where she could truly wish for something more. With clasped hands, the young girl expressed her heartfelt appreciation. "Thank you very much," she exclaimed, her voice soft but sincere. "I can study quietly here." As she spoke, her mother gently placed a hand on her head, a silent gesture of understanding. "Is that so?" her mother murmured. Within the quiet of her mind, the young girl affirmed her burgeoning resolve. "I still have things I want to do. I have a dream I want to fulfill." The young girl's resolve hardened, her gaze unwavering. She looked up, her voice ringing with newfound determination. "Please believe in me, for my mother's sake too," she declared. "I will become the strongest and coolest villainess in the world." At the tender age of 5, Myrtia, a child accustomed to being pampered and indulged, stood in her room, her face contorted in a furious scowl. She pointed an accusing finger at a vase of flowers, declaring her intense dislike for their color and demanding to know who had placed them there. She continued her tirade, ordering the maids to stop standing idly by and replace the offending flowers immediately. She threatened to report them to her father if they did not comply, prompting the maids to offer their apologies. Still, she pressed them, urging them to move faster and bring something far cuter to adorn her room. Meanwhile, the maids exchanged weary glances, lamenting that Lady Myrtia's tantrums had begun once more, especially over such a trivial matter as flowers she disliked. She overheard their whispers and, with a sharp gasp, turned to them, her voice rising as she threatened to have them all dismissed by her father. As she turned away in a huff, Myrtia misstepped on the grand staircase, her foot missing a step. She tumbled forward, a sudden thought flashing through her mind. Perhaps this was divine retribution for her daily misbehavior. She hit her head hard as she fell, eliciting screams from the maids. In that jarring moment, a flood of memories from a previous life surged into her mind. She recalled her mother, a woman from a fallen noble family, who had lived under constant pressure, urging her to marry into a good family and fulfill her own unachieved dreams, admonishing her to learn social graces instead of wasting time reading books. She found herself ostracized in social circles, often hearing whispers about her family's status and her own plain, old-fashioned dresses. It was then she discovered a beloved novel, a sanctuary for her heart, and within its pages, a truly splendid villainess. The villainess, depicted with an air of elegant superiority, stood over a kneeling male noble, declaring that justice was utter nonsense and that she cared not for the opinions of society. She envisioned the villainess, a figure of unwavering conviction, declaring her intent to believe in herself and forge her own path, no matter the circumstances, with an indomitable will. This powerful image resonated deeply within her, as she, in her previous life, had always wished she could be like that, lamenting how she was the complete opposite. Suddenly, the world around her previous self had erupted in chaos as a massive earthquake struck, sending debris crashing down and people scrambling for safety amidst cries of alarm. The cataclysmic event brought her previous life to an abrupt end, leaving her body broken and her consciousness fading. In her final moments, a profound regret washed over her, a longing to have lived more freely, to have expressed her true feelings like the villainess from the novel. Then, she awoke, gasping for air, her small body trembling in a grand bed. The maid's voice, filled with concern, called out to her, confirming her new identity as Myrtia. The maid, relieved, expressed her joy that Myrtia had finally awakened, asking if she felt well. Myrtia, still disoriented, managed to confirm she was all right, and the maid offered to fetch fresh water. As the maid departed, Myrtia clutched her chest, a profound realization settling upon her. Her life was not over. She gripped the bedsheets tightly, a fierce resolve hardening her expression. If she had been given a second chance at life, she vowed, she would never again be swayed by others. She would go where she pleased, eat what she desired, and do as she wished. With a determined glint in her eyes, she resolved to live her life following her own beliefs, just like the villainess from the novel. Thus, the villainess from her past life's novel became her new goal. However, a new problem immediately presented itself. She lacked the necessary knowledge and resources to become such a magnificent villainess. She knew it was not too late to begin. To become a magnificent villainess, she first needed to become a respectable person, one who could grasp the hearts of those around her. She resolved to study diligently. Meanwhile, the other maids observed her with a mixture of surprise and curiosity, wondering what had come over the young lady Myrtia. She was now so polite and never complained, dedicating herself to her studies with an intensity that suggested her very life depended on it. Her newfound diligence, however, sometimes led to moments of peril. Reaching for a book on human psychology from a high shelf, she lost her footing on the ladder. A maid, quick as a flash, lunged forward, crying out a warning as Myrtia tumbled down, scattering books in her way. The maid, Shell, caught her just in time, cradling the young lady protectively. Myrtia, relieved and grateful, thanked her personal attendant. Shell, still holding Myrtia, listened as the young lady, undeterred by her fall, continued to list the vast array of subjects she intended to master: magic, imperial history, social studies, economics, law, territorial management, pharmacology, magic engineering, physics, magic biology, psychology, and statistics. Shell could only stare, overwhelmed by the sheer ambition. Shell gently advised her not to overexert herself, acknowledging her admirable dedication. Myrtia, however, insisted she understood, explaining that to become a truly cool villainess, she needed overwhelming charisma. She believed this required her to consider the interests of others, satisfy them, and then put those principles into practice herself. She then turned her gaze to Shell, her eyes filled with profound gratitude. "Shell," she began, "you are always the one who watches over me most closely, and you always anticipate my needs." With a playful wink, she asked for Shell's continued support. Shell, touched by the sentiment, readily agreed, affirming her unwavering loyalty to her young mistress. Elsewhere, the other maids continued to discuss Myrtia's transformation. They remarked on how truly good she had become, noting her efforts, how she would wake early to greet them, and even offer to help with their tasks. Indeed, they agreed, Myrtia was a very good child, and the perception of the servants towards her was gradually beginning to change. While she had always been that way, they felt, recently, it was even more pronounced. She, Myrtia's personal maid, Shell, was overcome with emotion, tears streaming down her face as she exclaimed how incredibly cute Myrtia was. Meanwhile, the other maids, who had initially regarded Myrtia with suspicion, now gathered in hushed excitement, their whispers filled with admiration for their young mistress. Shell recounted a particular incident. Myrtia, despite her small stature, had offered to help a maid struggling with a heavy load. She had asked if the maid was all right and what her favorite flower was, leaving the maid deeply touched and calling Myrtia an angel. Shell continued, explaining that Myrtia had then gone to a nearby mountain to gather those very flowers, returning covered in mud but beaming with pride. When Shell asked if she wasn't happy, Myrtia insisted she was, indeed, very happy. Other maids were also heard discussing Myrtia's endearing cuteness, recalling how Shell had taken her to bathe after the muddy flower-gathering adventure. Shell, overhearing their conversation, felt a surge of pride. Myrtia, observing the growing admiration from the staff, allowed a subtle, knowing smile to grace her lips. Her plan was unfolding perfectly. She reveled in the thought that everyone now admired her as a charismatic villainess, just as she intended. And so, as the days turned into months, Myrtia reached her 7th year, having completely captured the hearts and loyalty of the entire household staff. Yet, she knew her journey was far from complete. To become a truly magnificent villainess, she would need a capable partner and a suitable prodigy. She sensed such a person was already within the confines of the mansion. Just then, the head butler, Vincent, approached Myrtia, inquiring about her mood. He suggested they prepare tea outside, as the weather was pleasant, and mentioned Shell would assist. Vincent, the impeccable butler, managed the entire household with flawless efficiency. Though Vincent presented a flawless facade, Myrtia had thoroughly investigated his background, uncovering the truth behind his carefully constructed persona. She observed him, noting the subtle traces of a hidden past in his demeanor. Myrtia knew individuals like him well, and she pondered why someone with such a history would choose to serve as a butler. As he interacted with her, Myrtia realized he harbored a strong admiration for fictional butlers, a detail that solidified her conviction. He was, she concluded, the perfect partner for her villainous ambitions. With a mischievous smile, Myrtia extended a sealed letter to him, instructing him to read it alone. He accepted the letter, his expression questioning her request, asking if it was indeed something meant for his eyes only. As he began to read, his calm demeanor shattered, replaced by a look of profound shock. His disguise, he realized, had been completely seen through. The letter revealed his true identity. Vincent was Reneu, the eldest son of the imperial family, a former agent who had once decided the fate of nations. It confirmed that he was indeed living under a false identity. It further detailed how he had lost his parents in a war, raised from a young age as an imperial agent, and forced to fight. He had sought to end the conflict through information, but the path proved brutal and unreasonable. Disillusioned, he had abandoned his organization, changed his name, and erased his past. His eyes widened behind his glasses, acknowledging the undeniable truth of the words. He had indeed lived that life. Myrtia watched him, a subtle, knowing smile playing on her lips, wondering what his reaction would be and what her own true objective was in revealing his past. She sat comfortably, observing Vincent as he approached, asking if she was experiencing any difficulties. With a knowing smile, she urged him to speak plainly, indicating her readiness to hear his true concerns. He looked on as she, with a confident gesture, extended her hand and declared her intention for him to become her partner, essential for the realization of her grand plan. Vincent, taken aback, could only utter a questioning plan. She then presented him with a book, its title boldly proclaiming it to be the Grand Villainous Plan. As he began to read, his calm demeanor fractured, replaced by a look of intense scrutiny. The text spoke of fighting the evil that plagued the country, but also contained what he perceived as a painful delusion, like a girl in her early teens. He continued to pore over the pages, his expression hardening. A thought formed in his mind. Was she testing him, or had she truly seen through his carefully constructed facade? He suspected the plan itself was merely a pretense for something far deeper. His gaze remained fixed on the intricate script, every word drawing him further into the depths of her audacious proposal. Meanwhile, she sat with a serene smile, her thoughts revealing a profound understanding. This child, Vincent, knew the inherent dangers of both justice and human nature. She spoke of herself as a villainess who would judge the distorted justice and rule the world from the shadows. He absorbed her words, a new realization dawning. She intended to act as an agent of evil to save the very people suffering in this world, a world she believed was riddled with distorted justice. A stark image of a ruined landscape flashed through his mind, a desolate reminder of the pure justice he had once pursued, now seemingly shattered. He looked up at Myrtia, a profound understanding settling upon him. This child knew everything about him, his past, his true self. She was reaching out, not just to him, but to change this very world. With a radiant smile, Myrtia addressed him, acknowledging his excellence and asking him to cooperate. She extended her hand, her eyes shining with conviction, stating that she still had a reason to live and things she needed to accomplish. Vincent, observing her, allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. He finally made his decision. With a confident smile, Vincent knelt before Myrtia, extending his hand to her. He addressed her formally, declaring his intent to join her, stating that together they would judge evil and save those who had been oppressed. Myrtia, reaching out to meet his grasp, felt a surge of conviction, realizing that with him, her grand plan might truly succeed. The grand hallway stretched, its arched ceilings and ornate windows reflecting the quiet elegance of the estate. As Myrtia walked beside Vincent, he spoke of the importance of capturing people's hearts and finding excellent partners, hinting at the villainess's role in saving the weak from evil. His words echoed in Myrtia's mind, causing her to ponder their meaning. She questioned if her own actions, which she had written down as part of her plan, truly aligned with being a cool villainess, or if she was merely helping people. She then envisioned the red-haired villainess, surrounded by bound men, declaring herself a true villainess who would not tolerate half-hearted evil. The vivid image made Myrtia blush with admiration, finding the villainess's resolve incredibly cool, before she quickly composed herself. Her imagination continued, now showing the red-haired villainess from behind, poised to act, her thoughts focused on saving the weak from evil. This, Myrtia realized, was the true direction she needed to take. With a renewed sense of purpose, Myrtia dashed down the grand hallway, determined not to betray Vincent's expectations and to create a new, intricate plan. Soon after, she sat at her desk, diligently writing. She mused about the classic trope of a corrupt organization influencing noble society and even the royal family, acknowledging it as a common narrative flow. She continued to write, her expression determined, outlining her strategy to crush those individuals one by one, whose actions caused the nobility's values to crumble and the common people to suffer. As Myrtia remained engrossed in her studies, diligently writing at her desk, Shell observed her from the doorway, noting how adorable she looked, so earnestly focused on her work. Myrtia, embodying her villainous persona, presented a meticulously crafted document to Vincent, who knelt before her. She inquired about his thoughts on the plan she had devised overnight. He respectfully acknowledged her as young lady and affirmed his readiness to investigate her requests. As he perused the document, Vincent's expression shifted to one of profound shock, his eyes widening behind his glasses. He questioned the very existence of such an organization as described within the papers. Myrtia watched as he swiftly rose and dashed away, declaring his immediate intent to investigate the matter further. Several days later, Vincent returned to Myrtia, who was now comfortably seated on a sofa. He presented a formal report, confirming his findings. His gaze, sharp and focused, reflected a grim understanding as he confirmed that Myrtia's initial assessment had been entirely accurate. The truth revealed a clandestine entity known as the 300 People Committee, which secretly controlled the Magic Kingdom. Driven by ideologies of eugenics and bloodline supremacy, they operated numerous criminal organizations, accumulating immense profits, and subtly manipulated the populace to maintain their power structure. Vincent, his expression somber, further elaborated on the committee's devastating impact, identifying them as the root cause of the nation's widespread suffering and poverty, an unsalvageable, immense evil. Myrtia, now with a serious demeanor, acknowledged Vincent's diligent work and the shocking reality that such a committee truly existed. She then advised him against rushing into action, quoting an Eastern proverb that emphasized the importance of patience and thorough preparation. She concluded that the current moment called for gathering strength. As Vincent stood before her, Myrtia continued, explaining that because their adversary was formidable and could not be easily defeated, they must prepare carefully, accumulating their efforts day by day. Vincent, his gaze resolute, agreed that they must utterly crush this immense evil. Myrtia's face was a mask of fierce determination as she declared her unwavering resolve to make them understand what true evil truly was. She recalled a painful memory from her past. At the age of 8, during her magic aptitude test, it was determined that despite being a noble, she possessed the lowest rank, capable only of life magic. Her father, enraged by this perceived disgrace, had intended to banish her. However, her mother had intervened, stepping between Myrtia and her furious father. She declared that Myrtia was capable of great things, preventing the banishment, though Myrtia herself felt as if she was escaping from her mother's very words. Following this intervention, Myrtia's secluded life began. Though she was not separated from Shell, she found herself in a quiet place where she could dedicate herself to studying and practicing magic, even mastering the volatile art of fire. As her studies progressed, Vincent diligently assisted her, bringing her the books she required. He approached her, holding a stack of volumes, and informed her that he had brought the books she had been searching for. Myrtia offered her thanks to Vincent for his help. Just then, Shell appeared, her face etched with distress, calling out Myrtia's name with a plea in her voice. Myrtia, noticing Shell's pale complexion, asked if she was all right. Shell, tears streaming down her face, insisted she was fine now, but confessed that the separation from Myrtia had left her unable to eat, a revelation Vincent observed with a calm expression. Myrtia gently cupped Shell's face, a soft smile gracing her lips as she affectionately called her silly. Shell, in turn, returned the smile, a sense of comfort washing over her. Vincent then explained that he had brought Shell because she was trustworthy and capable, but acknowledged that there were limits to what two people could achieve alone. Shell, overhearing their conversation, looked thoughtful and questioned, "A plan?" A sudden realization dawned upon Shell, her eyes widening as she finally grasped the true depth of Myrtia's intentions. She uttered Myrtia's name, a mixture of awe and understanding in her voice. With unwavering resolve, Myrtia declared her intention to bring judgment upon the corrupt noble society and the evil party that plagued their world. She would become the strongest villainess, and Shell, standing beside her, looked on with a determined expression, ready to support her mistress. She heard the words of adoration, a voice calling her an angel for her ambition to save people from the corrupt nobility. Shell, overcome with emotion, declared her profound love and admiration, marveling at Myrtia's young age yet mature thoughts, her stylish attire, and her adorable insistence on justice. Pleased by Shell's fervent praise, Myrtia responded with a confident smile, asserting that such admiration was only natural for her. Shell, still flustered, questioned what Myrtia was saying. As Myrtia dedicated herself to her studies, she began to practice her magic in the secluded library, a faint, fiery aura emanating from her hands. She immersed herself in ancient texts, learning that while life magic was considered the lowest form, nobles typically trained in more conventional magic. Yet, Myrtia realized, precisely because it was deemed inferior, life magic remained largely unresearched, hinting at untapped potential. Suddenly, a startled cry escaped her as Vincent entered the library, causing her to drop her book and fall from her chair. He rushed to her side, calling out her name in concern. Myrtia quickly reassured him, explaining that the library was dangerous due to the many books, and that Shell, being overprotective, wouldn't allow her to practice if she were present. With a determined expression, she commanded her super fire-starting magic to ignite. A small, controlled flame flickered above her hand, demonstrating her progress as Vincent watched, a subtle shift in his expression. She then declared her intent to master magic, not just to burn herself or her surroundings, but to control it perfectly. Vincent, adjusting his glasses, listened intently as she confidently stated she would show him her perfected magic. Her ambition was not new. Even as a child, she had moments of intense focus and surprise. She looked up, her hair a wild tangle, as Vincent stood nearby, meticulously organizing books on a tall shelf. It was during one such moment that her mother approached her, a gentle expression on her face. Myrtia looked up, calling out to her. Her mother, observing her disheveled state, gently touched Myrtia's messy hair, remarking on how much she had grown and how fluffy her hair had become. Myrtia, embarrassed, claimed it was merely an accident. Her mother then asked Vincent to give them a moment alone, to which he respectfully agreed. Her mother's words echoed in the quiet room, reassuring Myrtia that it was perfectly fine, and that she simply wanted her to be herself. Myrtia, still pondering her mother's words, then questioned her about a past event, asking why she had protected her during the magic aptitude test, especially when such an action could have jeopardized her mother's standing. Her mother explained her responsibilities as a countess, which included managing the household and the maids, as well as raising her children. Myrtia then pressed, asking if her mother had helped her out of sheer desperation. Her mother firmly denied this, stating it was not the only reason. Myrtia reflected on her past, realizing she had always played the role others expected of her, never daring to voice her own opinions, especially when she felt the values of noble society were misguided. Her mother then revealed her own efforts, explaining that she had studied how to interact with maids without prejudice, and that she found Myrtia admirable for striving to be a splendid person. She confessed that Myrtia's inherent strength had, in fact, given her courage. This revelation struck Myrtia deeply, as she realized she had to protect her mother's kindness. She resolved that she could not use her illness as an excuse and vowed to live her life without regret, seizing the one chance she had. Her mother smiled warmly, embracing Myrtia, and told her that because of her, she had been able to become someone she never thought she could be. She then added, "Therefore, no matter what happens." She gently cupped Myrtia's face, her voice a soft reassurance that Myrtia would be absolutely fine, no matter what she did, what she said, or what anyone else might say to her. Myrtia's wide, glistening eyes reflected her mother's unwavering support, tears beginning to well at the edges. Her mother smiled warmly, her eyes closed in a gesture of deep affection, urging Myrtia never to forget those crucial words. Moments later, Myrtia clung to her mother, who spoke softly of going to a slightly distant world, acknowledging the possibility that they might not see each other again. The embrace tightened as her mother expressed profound gratitude for Myrtia's birth and declared her deep love for her. 2 weeks later, the world changed. Myrtia's mother passed away. The young Myrtia was forbidden from attending the funeral, forcing her to suppress her tears and dedicate herself to magic practice more than ever before. Even as she practiced, tears streamed down her face, and her father, Vincent, observed her with a stern, unreadable expression, questioning her resolve. Her face contorted in a silent sob. Myrtia felt as though she might break down completely at any moment. She resolved that she was not a crybaby, as her mother had believed, and that she was different from the cool villainess she admired. Sometime after her mother's passing, Myrtia was summoned by her father. He, along with a male noble, informed her that she would serve as a proxy lord for the territory of Reneu. She contemplated the territory of Reneu, a place with poor land unsuitable for agriculture, its primary industry. It had been neglected for years due to misrule, making it the most dangerous region in the Magic Kingdom. A profound realization dawned on her. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She declared her understanding with a resolute expression. Despite her resolve, the assembled servants and nobles expressed their deep concern, questioning if she truly intended to go to Reneu, implying such a journey was akin to walking towards her own demise. She offered a confident smile, reassuring them not to worry, for she would be perfectly fine. She then bowed deeply to the gathered maids and servants, expressing her gratitude for all they had done. She turned and walked away from the grand mansion, bidding farewell to those who remained. Inside the carriage, she gazed out with a thoughtful expression as the vehicle began its journey. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, Shell and Vincent stood ready, each carrying a suitcase, prepared for their own departure. They walked purposefully towards the waiting carriage, following Myrtia's lead. As they walked, Vincent adjusted his glasses, remarking that Shell seemed to have no intention of serving anyone other than Myrtia. Shell, with a cheerful and unwavering smile, readily confirmed his observation, proudly stating that she was Myrtia's partner. She offered a sincere thank you to both of them, her loyal attendants, for their unwavering support. As she prepared to board the carriage, she looked back, her gaze finding her mother. She silently urged her to watch, for she was about to embark on a significant journey. Her mother embraced her in a moment of tender farewell, but Myrtia's thoughts were already set on a grander purpose. She reflected on how her mother had long suffered the injustices of noble society, and a fierce resolve hardened her expression. She vowed to become the strongest, most magnificent villainess, one who would utterly destroy that corrupt world. The journey to the desolate territory began. A young maid, with a bright smile, expressed her joy that the young man, Vincent, was accompanying them. He, covering his eyes with one hand, simply stated that it was only natural. She then declared to a surprised young girl, Myrtia, that she was now officially able to serve her and asked for any commands. Myrtia, wide-eyed, questioned if she truly meant anything, to which the maid enthusiastically confirmed. The maid then leaned down, suggesting that Myrtia should allow herself to be pampered by her words. Myrtia, looking thoughtful, realized that what she truly desired was to be embraced. She then embraced the maid tightly. Meanwhile, Vincent informed them that the Magic Potion Guild had secured the planned amount of medicine. Myrtia, looking at the large chest of potions, expressed surprise at the quantity, noting the severity of the lineage's symptoms. Vincent, sitting beside them, apologized for independently changing the type of medicine. Myrtia, however, reassured him, stating that she trusted his judgment and believed he had made the best choice. She added that Vincent was far more capable than she was. He offered a gentle smile, acknowledging Myrtia's words, and internally recognized her as truly a great person. Suddenly, both Myrtia and the maid looked utterly shocked. The maid exclaimed that Myrtia was getting bigger. Myrtia, however, was consumed by an internal thought, seeing an image of a cool, slender, and tall villainess, and lamenting that her own short stature was a curse from her previous life. Myrtia's eyes widened with distress, questioning if her height truly wasn't growing. Vincent and the maid quickly sought to reassure Myrtia, telling her that she would surely grow taller. Myrtia, however, still looked down, her worry evident. The journey concluded as the carriage arrived in Lineage. Inside the carriage, she gazed out the window, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as they passed a desolate, muddy area where a small, huddled figure sat amidst debris. Vincent, seated opposite her, observed her reaction with a quiet intensity. Her mind raced, recalling the image of the ideal villainess she aspired to be, a figure of elegance and power. She mused that the common noble's way of thinking and acting was far too shallow for her tastes. She then embraced Maid A, who had been listening intently, declaring that she would absolutely crush the despicable noble's lineage that had caused so many to suffer and be abandoned. Moments later, as the carriage continued its slow progress, a hostile crowd of villagers, armed with pitchforks and crude weapons, emerged from the narrow streets, blocking their path. From within the carriage, she watched the escalating confrontation. The angry villagers surrounded them, shouting accusations and insults, demanding to know why the trash nobles had returned to lineage. As the threats intensified, Maid A instinctively shielded Medea, her body tensing against the potential impact of the angry mob. The villagers continued to yell, accusing them of causing immense suffering and vowing to kill them if they tried to take anything more. Despite the fear that gnawed at her, she acknowledged that this turn of events was precisely what she had anticipated. Yet, even with the fear, a fierce resolve began to harden within her. She knew that her admired Villainous would never yield to such trivial adversity. This was her moment to become that very figure. With a sudden, chilling smile, she emerged from the carriage, her eyes gleaming with a newfound, sinister confidence. Vincent and Maid A looked on, startled by her transformation, as she declared she would show them what a true villainess was. The villagers, momentarily stunned by her unexpected appearance and bold declaration, questioned who this brat was, and if the next lord was merely a child playing at nobility. Medea's declaration had momentarily stunned the mob, but the tension remained palpable. Suddenly, one of the villagers, a man with a pitchfork, lunged forward, only to be swiftly intercepted by Vincent. He held the man firmly, warning him not to get carried away. Despite Vincent's efforts, the situation escalated. He wrestled the aggressive villager to the ground, pinning him, while the other villagers continued to shout, their anger undiminished. Medea, still on the ground, watched the unfolding chaos. The mob's fury intensified, their cries growing louder and more menacing. They demanded that Medea fall into hell, their faces contorted with rage. Medea, her expression a mix of fear and determination, extended her hand as if to ward them off or perhaps to reach for something unseen. Medea, with a determined expression, pointed a finger, commanding someone to rise. Vincent, kneeling nearby, struggled to move, realizing his body was unresponsive. Medea clarified that her actions were merely housekeeping magic, a simple form of everyday enchantment. She then extended her arms, performing a sweeping gesture that seemed to clear the air around her. As the dust settled, Medea turned to the distressed villagers, declaring them weak. She asserted that they were not even worthy of being called evil. Her gaze hardened as she explained that she acknowledged their existence, but the circumstances that drove them to such desperation were a result of the country's inherent corruption, a distortion caused by the nobility. She continued, expressing her profound dislike for those without magical aptitude, and her intention to make those who tormented her brother suffer and flee. With a chilling smile, Medea declared her purpose. She had come to utterly destroy the corrupt nobles. The villagers watched, stunned by her pronouncement. Meanwhile, Vincent approached Medea, holding a small bottle and a wooden box. He explained that the bottle contained medicine for the plague. The villagers, desperate and suffering, cried out that they had been forced into banditry because of the illness, and now they had nothing left to lose. Medea looked at the medicine, questioning if they intended to impose heavy taxes again for such an expensive remedy. The villagers, eager for relief, urged her to quickly administer it. She firmly stated that she would do no such thing. With a sudden shift in demeanor, Medea pointed at the villager leader, a bright, almost innocent smile on her face. She explained that while she showed no mercy to her enemies, she possessed a kind heart for those under her protection, for she was a villainess. The villagers stared back, utterly bewildered. Medea, now fully embodying her role as the acting lord, sternly ordered the villagers to quickly take the medicine to the sick. Vincent looked on, surprised by her commanding tone. As the villagers scrambled to obey, Medea mused to herself, wondering if she had perhaps been too much of a villainess in her delivery. Medea, having just distributed medicine, gently held the hands of a distressed villager woman. She reassured her, promising that everything would be all right and she would surely get better. Meanwhile, other villagers lined up, eager for the medicine. Nearby, Vincent observed a male villager with a visibly injured leg, noting with concern that the man's injury had gone untreated. Medea stood a short distance away, her attention also on the suffering villagers. The injured man, still on the ground, turned to Medea and hesitantly asked if she possessed healing magic. He explained that he had been told only high-level magic users could treat such severe wounds, and that his condition was beyond help. Medea, however, simply stated that she could not. She then considered the limitations of conventional healing magic, realizing that while it could mend minor injuries, it struggled with widespread illnesses or more complex ailments. Vincent, having overheard her thoughts or perhaps understanding the common knowledge of magic, concurred. He elaborated that applying healing magic over a broad area was impractical, requiring precise coordination and a fixed point of effect. Medea, however, turned to him with a determined expression, declaring that she had been practicing diligently. She asserted her ability to use magic to heal injuries and activate the body, a statement that clearly surprised Vincent. She continued to ponder, acknowledging that while the individual effect of her small magic was indeed minor, it was theoretically possible to layer these small spells repeatedly to achieve a greater outcome. With a direct gaze, Medea extended her hands towards Vincent, instructing him to observe closely. As Vincent watched, Medea's hands began to glow with a soft light, poised to unleash her unique magic. A man knelt, clutching his leg in agony, exclaiming that his leg was injured. Beside him, another man in a light jacket knelt, asking if this demonstration was sufficient. Medea stood nearby, observed by Vincent. Medea, her eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears, reacted to the injured man. She questioned if it was truly a lie, if he was genuinely walking without pain. Moments later, Medea clapped her hands together, a bright smile gracing her face as she expressed profound gratitude to the Lord. The injured man, now standing and walking freely, was surrounded by other villagers who praised his swift recovery and his efforts. With a confident, almost mischievous smile, Medea declared that such feats were easy for her. Her long hair flowed around her as she gestured with an air of effortless power. Vincent, observing Medea, chuckled softly. The villagers around them expressed their admiration, calling her amazing and cute. She then stated her intention to bring even more people who needed help to her. Medea stood before a young man, her hands outstretched, glowing with an aura of power as she healed him. Behind her, a makeshift clinic had been established. She continued to smile confidently, reassuring Vincent that healing was easy for her and that the patient was recovering well. However, a maid with short, light hair interrupted, reminding Medea that it was time for her break. Medea insisted she was fine, but the maid firmly stated it was not allowed. The maid, firm in her resolve, pulled Medea away from the grateful patient, who continued to express thanks to the Lord. Vincent watched the scene unfold, appearing resigned to the maid's authority. The maid, identified as Cheru-san, stood with a stick, looking sternly at a group of villagers. One villager inquired if she was indeed Cheru-san, and she confirmed it. Another villager referred to her as the maid's young lady. Cheru-san firmly informed the villagers that Medea was resting and asked them to excuse her rudeness. The villagers seemed to accept this, one of them sighing, "Is that so?" Medea, having been sent to rest by Cheru, lay fast asleep, drooling onto her pillow as she dreamed of direct communication and delightful news. She stirred awake, stretching languidly as she noticed the fading light outside her window, realizing it was already evening. A soft chuckle escaped her lips, a quiet sound of contentment. Her gaze sharpened as she gripped the windowsill, a triumphant thought forming in her mind. She had successfully deceived them, and now her position in the territory would be smoothly established. She settled back, a cunning smile playing on her lips as she reflected on her strategy. First, she would make them believe victory was impossible, then she would subtly infiltrate their hearts. This, she mused, was the fundamental principle of winning people over, a truly villainous tactic to orchestrate events precisely as she desired. Her smug satisfaction grew as she observed the villagers in the background, their faces alight with admiration. They were all captivated by her abilities, a perfect outcome. She noted that everyone requiring immediate treatment had been cured, a testament to her research into what was commonly known as everyday magic. A villager's heartfelt thanks reached her ears, causing a faint blush to spread across her cheeks. She realized, with a touch of vulnerability, that she could truly rely on someone. A wide, genuine smile bloomed on her face, her eyes welling with tears of joy. To be appreciated in such a way, she thought, was truly wonderful. Yet, the moment of emotional revelation was fleeting, as she was once again found fast asleep, drooling onto her pillow. Nearby, Cheru, ever vigilant, watched over her with a stern expression. Cheru's sharp no jolted her awake, only for Medea to erupt in frustration, declaring that the monster of approval-seeking within her was on the verge of bursting forth. Still grappling with her internal turmoil, she thrashed against Cheru's firm grip. Cheru, ever the disciplinarian, sternly commanded her to calm down, warning her not to be consumed by it. Vincent and another maid watched the struggle from the doorway. Having regained her composure, Medea listened as Vincent mused that she was occasionally quite interesting, suggesting she might be overly idealizing the role of a villainess. The other maid, observing Medea, found her endearing despite her flaws. Vincent reiterated his sentiment, stating that Medea was indeed quite interesting. The maid, slightly puzzled, inquired what exactly he found so captivating. He responded with a confident, "Of course." The maid, her expression resolute, then declared that they would continue to strive to support Medea. Medea continued her tireless efforts to treat the villagers. Vincent, in turn, diligently gathered information, assessing symptoms and bringing patients to her as their conditions worsened, sometimes quite suddenly, as with one man whose state had deteriorated drastically the previous night. She acknowledged the situation, understanding the gravity of their plight. Despite her own exhaustion, Medea found herself being cared for by Cheru, who attended to her with a stern, maid-like demeanor. Meanwhile, the townspeople, once ailing, were steadily regaining their health, a testament to the ongoing efforts. Simultaneously, a makeshift treatment facility began to take shape in the town's central square. Villagers, now recovering, offered their assistance, asking if they could help. One man volunteered to carry supplies, while another urged Medea to rest. She expressed her gratitude, reflecting on how initially, only she, Cheru, and Vincent had been involved in the monumental task. Now, however, the entire town was cooperating, a sight Medea observed with a quiet satisfaction as she stood amidst the bustling activity. A wave of triumph washed over her, manifesting in a small, pleased smile and a subtle puff of her cheeks. She mused internally, reminding herself not to let her face contort too much, for she was a cool villainess. She believed that by continuing in this manner, raising the Lord's approval rating, she could solidify her foundation for a splendid villainous life. Medea, with a confident gesture, directed a villager to bring the next materials, to which he readily agreed. The villagers around her admired her, remarking on her ability to strike poses and her incredible talent, especially considering she was still only 10 years old. Vincent, observing Medea from a distance, reflected on her actions. He wondered if she, this Medea Lumiere, might be capable of transforming this place, which had become so corrupted. 3 weeks passed since Medea's arrival in the lineage and the commencement of her treatments for the villagers. Inside a well-appointed room, Medea, with Cheru nearby, considered the situation. She acknowledged that while she could not forgive the previous administration, the current living conditions, with their splendid furnishings and equipment, were quite good. She felt a sense of gratitude for this, and above all, for the opportunity to make a significant impact. She beamed with delight, expressing her joy that they could all finally share a meal together. Her enthusiasm continued as she declared it a holiday, ready to work hard again tomorrow. She mused internally that such a scene, eating in a proper room, had been a dream in her previous life, where her father was strict and she was always in the basement. Vincent, observing her, explained that thanks to Medea's tireless efforts, there were no longer any seriously ill patients requiring immediate treatment. He added that since her arrival, she had not taken a single day off, suggesting she should relax and enjoy her day. Medea looked surprised. A memory surfaced, a vivid recollection of her past life from that very day. She recalled being told she possessed no magical talent, and how, even then, all she had truly desired was a single day of rest. She wondered if it was truly acceptable for her to do as she pleased now. Back in the present, she affirmed her resolve, clutching a book titled My Magnificent Villainous Plan, which detailed the setting of a despicable villain. She believed she was meant to prepare for her ideal villainous life. To advance her grand scheme, she realized she would need a substantial amount of money. She loved money, just as her admired Villainous did, and she would need it to buy splendid dresses and to make the corrupt nobles feel good. She considered the taxes the Lord collected as his right, concluding that if she simply waited, more money would surely come in. However, she also recognized that since establishing the clinic, she had not truly explored the land, realizing she needed to learn more about it. Just then, Vincent approached, asking if she intended to go into town. She readily agreed, accepting his offer to accompany her. She and Vincent finally arrived in the bustling town square, its simple buildings rising around them as the subtle sounds of daily life filled the air. The desolate landscape stretched out, revealing crumbling structures and barren fields, a stark testament to the hardships endured by the land and its inhabitants. Medea walked through the impoverished town, her thoughts consumed by the question of why this place had fallen into such a state of ruin. She considered the heavy taxes and the plague as contributing factors, but since there was more to uncover. As she knelt to examine the parched earth, a grim realization dawned upon her. The soil had been overused, leaving it utterly incapable of sustaining any crops. Vincent observed her discovery with a somber expression. Vincent then explained that the previous lord's brother had imposed an exorbitant number of taxes, forcing the residents to overwork the land to pay them. As a result, the land's fertility had been completely stripped away, and he warned that restoring new soil would take years. The village itself appeared as a collection of humble, worn-down buildings, nestled amidst the barren landscape, reflecting the deep-seated poverty that afflicted its people. Turning to face the gathered villagers, Medea declared her intention to lower their taxes, a promise that brought a glimmer of hope to their weary faces. She continued, acknowledging the immense challenge of reforming agriculture in their depleted land, but assured them with unwavering confidence that everything would ultimately be fine. A villager leader, still skeptical, urged her to examine the soil in the field, pointing out that it had undergone a significant change. He demanded to know what she had done. Medea, with a confident, almost mischievous smile, questioned his meaning, suggesting that if the soil was indeed as he described, they would be unable to grow crops. The villager leader stared in utter disbelief, unable to comprehend the sudden transformation. A few days prior, Medea had discussed with Vincent the possibility of finding someone to cooperate with their plans, deeming it a good idea. Now, in the present, she stood with her hands outstretched, a powerful aura emanating from her as she actively transformed the barren earth, bringing life back to the land. She continues to channel her magic, a powerful spell that bestows nutrients upon the barren earth. Medea understands that a single application offers only a small effect, and resolves to repeat the process 90 times. Her hands glow with energy, knowing the land's problem lies in its depleted nutrients, a consequence of her own past actions. As she works, the villager leader, astonished, kneels before her, exclaiming that he never imagined the young lady could wield magic to change the very soil. Medea, looking at him, simply states that such a feat is nothing to her. The villager leader, still reeling from the display, asks if it is truly possible for crops to grow now. Medea, with a bright smile, confirms it, adding that she will teach them agricultural techniques starting tomorrow. He is overwhelmed, unsure how to express his gratitude. He explains that he has been confined to the underground for so long, knowing little of the outside world, and wishes to see other fields. He expresses his hope that if they are pleased, everyone else will be too. Vincent observes Medea, who remains kneeling, calmly assessing the soil and what the villagers require. He muses internally that such a sight would surely draw attention, a thought he must suppress. Medea, still focused on the earth, explains that just as people have individual personalities, so too does the soil possess distinct characteristics. The ground around them shimmers with countless glowing particles, a testament to the magic permeating the earth. The villagers watch in awe, their faces filled with wonder and relief. The villager leader, beaming, declares that the soil has indeed become good. Medea then takes up a hoe, preparing to work the land herself. The villager leader, concerned, asks if she, a noble, should be handling such heavy tools, especially since she has been confined to her room until recently. She reassures him, stating it is fine. Vincent, observing her, notes the unfamiliar sensation of her hands touching the earth. She smiles brightly, her face smudged with dirt, declaring that no one will blame her for getting dirty. She wonders aloud what she should do next. Medea tumbles to the ground, her face hitting the dirt. A foot steps near her, and a voice suggests moving to another spot. As she looks up from the soil, a surprised expression crosses her face. Vincent and Maid_A observe her with amusement, while Maid_B and other staff members rush towards her, calling out her name and title with concern. Ignoring their calls, she holds up a small earthworm, her face beaming with excitement as she exclaims that she has found one. She proudly presents the worm to Vincent and the kneeling maids, explaining that this was her first time seeing such a creature. One of the maids remarks that the presence of earthworms is a sign of good soil, before gently instructing Medea to shake off the dirt from her clothes. Still smiling, she remains captivated by the small creature in her hands, as Vincent and the maids watch over her. Far from the fields, within the opulent halls of the royal palace, Maid_ observes a figure walking away, remarking that it was the first time she had seen him since he was a newcomer. The figure is revealed to be Cal von Elmia, the third prince of Elmia, who smiles confidently. A voice notes his beauty that day, adding that the rumors surrounding him must be addressed. He chided, remarking that as royalty, one should possess a bit more composure. The other, acknowledging the remark, confirmed he had heard. As he walked away, the attendant mused that it was better to be perceived as a playboy, as it allowed him to avoid suspicion. Moments later, he returned, offering a polite apology for his absence. Kyle, with a slight smirk, questioned if he was late, to which the attendant confirmed he had something important to verify. The attendant then presented a stack of reports, indicating they were ready for review. Kyle began to read, his expression hardening as he absorbed the contents. He declared that the country was utterly rotten, its people suffering because of it. He condemned the ruling council, the 200 committee, for being filled with incompetent individuals who merely sought to protect their own interests. He vowed to change this corrupt society, no matter what means he had to employ. With a hand covering part of his face, Kyle then inquired about the current state of lineage. The attendant reported that the land was barren due to misrule, and an infectious disease was spreading, leading to rebellious nobles attacking. The attendant continued, revealing that from that very territory, the fifth daughter of the Reneu family, a girl of about 10 years old, had been sent as a substitute for the third son. Kyle, his gaze sharp, asked for her name. He then repeated it, Medea Reneu, as if committing it to memory. Seeing Kyle's intense reaction, the attendant, addressing him respectfully, urged him to listen calmly and composedly. He pondered the dire situation, specifically how Medea Reneu, the young lady sent as a substitute lord, had managed to distribute medicine and use high-level magic to treat over 500 people in her territory. It was a desperate state of affairs. He then commanded Vincent to prepare a carriage for lineage. Vincent, however, attempted to dissuade him, suggesting he feign a stomach ache for 2 days, as he was scheduled for a hunting trip in the forest that very day. His resolve hardened. Kyle declared that some matters took precedence over all else. He urged Vincent to act swiftly, his expression unwavering as the image of the ideal villainess seemed to linger in his mind. Hands, stained with earth, carefully tended to a young sprout, a small snake slithering nearby. The territory's reforms were progressing smoothly. Elsewhere, in the verdant fields, several figures toiled under the sun, Medea among them, her long hair swaying as she worked. Covered in dirt but radiating joy, she proudly declared that everything was growing well. This marked the beginning of the third chapter. I want to be an elegant villainess. Later, within the opulent estate, Medea inquired if someone wished to meet her. Vincent confirmed it was the head of a merchant guild from a neighboring country, who had expressed interest in her activities as the lord. Adjusting his glasses, he cautioned her that while the merchant guild itself existed, the individual claiming to be its head might be an impostor. He suggested the true purpose of the visit could be to investigate them. Medea, wide-eyed, repeated his words, questioning if they were truly being sought out. A nervous Medea pondered the situation, feeling as though she was in a tense event from a story. Vincent then asked if she would still proceed with the meeting, as a mysterious, silhouetted figure stood nearby, awaiting her decision. With a determined expression, Medea declared that if the problem was a person from a hostile society, she would meet them. She resolved to play the part of a benevolent lord, especially since the reconstruction of her territory had just begun. She then instructed Vincent to make the necessary preparations. Moments later, Medea, now composed, greeted the visitor. She thanked him for traveling such a distance and extended a warm welcome. The visitor, a young man with an elegant demeanor, politely returned her gratitude, thanking them for their time. Kyle, standing nearby, observed the man with a keen, scrutinizing gaze. Kyle's thoughts drifted to the visitor's overly refined movements, concluding that he must have received a strict education in etiquette from a young age. He suspected that the man's claim of having no rank was an obvious lie. The merchant, the very man Kyle suspected, meticulously examined his own appearance. He noted the subtle alterations, a testament to the skillful technique that made his wig and glasses seem to vanish, changing his eye color and giving him a leaner look. He then reviewed a document, his attention drawn to an image of Kyle. He focused intently on the distinct shape of Kyle's ear, a detail that made him wonder if this was indeed Kyle von Elmia, the third prince of Elmia, a revelation that would be significant in this era of information. Meanwhile, Vincent expressed his grave concerns to Medea, warning her that she would be in danger if Prince Kyle was truly connected to the 300 Committee. Medea, listening intently, seemed to grasp the implications of Vincent's words, her expression shifting to one of surprise and understanding. She realized that Vincent had perceived the underlying threat even faster than she had. Despite the gravity of the situation, Medea's thoughts briefly drifted to the visitor's immense wealth, a detail she found amusing, while Vincent stood by, a hint of exasperation on his face. The merchant guild leader, continuing his conversation with Medea, explained that his lineage was not destined for future prosperity, but rather, there was a high possibility that his ancestors were connected to evil nobles. He then stated his desire to cherish history and tradition. He then politely requested to ask a few questions, to which Medea readily agreed. He inquired why they had saved the suffering villagers, and she explained that without the villagers, they could not effectively manage the territory, asserting that it was a natural duty for a feudal lord serving the Magic Kingdom. The merchant then pressed further, asking why the tax rate had been lowered. Medea clarified that it was a temporary measure, implemented because the villagers were struggling with an infectious disease, and the original tax rate should have been adjusted to align with the surrounding regions. The merchant listened, his expression thoughtful, then a subtle smile played on his lips as he considered the people of this land, noting their poor magical aptitude, and finding it very strange that it was deemed necessary to save them. He continued to reflect on the common aristocratic prejudice, the notion that those with low magic aptitude were inherently inferior. He acknowledged that even his own family once held such a view, a way of thinking that had been considered entirely normal. His thoughts delved deeper into the prevailing ideology, that only those with magical talent truly deserved to rule, while those without it were deemed worthless, their lives and deaths utterly inconsequential. Meanwhile, Medea's expression twisted into a fierce, almost predatory smile, her eyes gleaming with a chilling intensity as she internally condemned someone as vulgar and weak-willed. She sat calmly, sipping tea, maintaining her composure. Across from her, Kyle observed, a slight frown on his face, as he internally urged himself to remain calm, reminding himself that she must not be provoked. Medea, still smiling, explained her belief that there was inherent value in saving people, even if they did not directly contribute as a tax revenue source to the Magic Kingdom. She asserted that she saw worth in them. Kyle, seemingly relieved by her words, smiled and agreed, finding her perspective truly wonderful. However, Medea's internal thoughts continued to simmer with intense resolve, her eyes narrowed. She vowed to utterly crush those who dared to look down on others with such discriminatory arrogance. The merchant guild leader, seated on a plush chair, maintained his composed demeanor, his hands clasped, seemingly unaware of Medea's true, simmering rage. Kyle, with a pained expression, held a lock of dark hair, letting out a soft sigh. The night sky was visible through the window of a grand building. Vincent observed the ideal Villainous, who sat calmly, her long dark hair flowing around her. He reflected that she truly said nothing about herself, maintaining her composure no matter what was said to her. It was truly remarkable. He then turned to Kyle, who stood by a window, a cape draped over his shoulders. Vincent questioned why Kyle would lie, suggesting that if it weren't for him, no one would have even noticed the deception. Kyle smiled faintly, explaining that he had always been surrounded by liars, implying he was accustomed to such behavior. He continued, stating that what interested him more was the ideal Villainess's reaction when people were called lost souls. In that moment, her composure vanished, and he caught a glimpse of genuine emotion, a flicker of anger. Vincent, still concerned, told Kyle that his actions were too reckless, leaving too many openings. Kyle, however, dismissed his worries, ordering him to report on the situation. He declared it a direct command from the third prince. The ideal Villainous, now dressed in a maid uniform, stood with her back to the viewer, while Kyle was also present. It was revealed that she was a devourer and understood the country's madness better than anyone, secretly gathering strength to change the nation in some way. The grand, multi-storied mansion stood under a clear sky, its windows reflecting the light. Maid B, looking alarmed, presented a single flower to Vincent. She explained that it was delivered to the mansion by an unknown sender and expressed concern that it might be a bomb. Vincent, with a serious expression, instructed her to confirm its nature and to stay away from the shell. Vincent examined the iris flower, contemplating its meaning, faith, and hope. Nearby, the ideal Villainous rested, seemingly asleep. He internally noted that there was no danger outside, nor any strange sounds. He carefully examined the food items, noting the excessive amount of preservatives used. A maid A, expressed concern, asking what he would do if the food contained poison. He calmly reassured her, explaining that he possessed immunity to over 100 types of poisons. He then pondered the nature of the food, concluding that the sender must be someone of high status, given the type of preserved goods. Meanwhile, the first prince, Kyle, was known for his low evaluation among the nobility, and Vincent wondered if Medea's support could change this. He then considered that if this was indeed Kyle's form of support, then Medea had truly won his trust. Elsewhere, Medea diligently studied, surrounded by towering stacks of books. Vincent observed her, reflecting on her unwavering efforts despite the hardships she faced, noting that her hard work was now bearing fruit. Suddenly, Medea looked up from her studies, her eyes wide with surprise. She realized Vincent was smiling. Her attention then turned to the crates, recognizing them as the mysterious packages Vincent had mentioned. She wondered if they were from the merchant guild leader she had recently encountered, realizing that if they were, it meant he was trying to curry favor with her, the ideal villainess, a thought she found rather dangerous. She considered the blue flower that accompanied the packages, musing that the sender might be overly fond of romance novels. Ultimately, she decided it was best to avoid getting involved. 1 month later, Medea stood atop a rocky outcrop, striking a dramatic pose. She declared that this pose was perfectly villainous. As she enjoyed a cup of tea, a broader narrative unfolded. The surrounding territories had begun to notice the changes in Lineage's management, which was now focused on developing competitive industries and fostering healthy domain administration, making interaction with the surrounding regions indispensable. She observed Vincent as he spoke, his words a simple affirmation. Nearby, an older woman and a young girl listened intently, the woman remarking on the situation. He then requested a few days' time, receiving an immediate, affirmative response. His expression remained composed, hinting at the gravity of his task. Elsewhere, a young woman with flowing pink hair and bright blue eyes smiled knowingly. She was a soul who had experienced reincarnation not once, but thrice, carrying the wisdom of a century-old spirit within her youthful form. Her past, however, was not without torment. A furious noblewoman once shrieked at her, condemning her very existence and berating her for her perceived incompetence, especially her inability to properly wield magic. Yet, the pink-haired woman now declared with radiant confidence that she was, in fact, incredibly capable. She mused that perhaps it was better to live a peaceful life without extraordinary talent, a stark contrast to the past accusations. Days later, Vincent reported to Medea on the current state of the territories. He explained that the feudal lords were subtly hoarding their assets and gradually raising taxes without overtly provoking the populace, a situation he deemed worthy of caution. He continued, highlighting two influential figures, Viscount Hilton, who wielded significant power, and Viscount Charlius, whose presence had grown considerably since assuming his current lordship. Medea listened intently, her expression serious as she pondered whether turning either of these figures into an enemy would make all the surrounding lords hostile. Vincent further elaborated that if they were to turn hostile, suppressing the backlash from the surrounding regions would be challenging. He warned that the council, which unified the eastern region, held immense administrative authority over the Rhinish region, and many lords had been stripped of their status and power after questioning its decisions. Medea acknowledged his comprehensive report, her thoughtful expression unwavering. He added that he could provide even more detailed information in a few days. She then praised Vincent, remarking that he was no longer merely a spy, but had achieved an overwhelmingly complete level of skill, finding him quite impressive. Later that night, under a sky dotted with stars, Medea approached Medea, who was seated at her vanity. Medea excitedly recounted how she had helped Vincent with an infiltration mission the other day, finding the thrill of it truly enjoyable. She continued, beaming, to declare that even opening the safe had been easy. Medea, however, looked at her with a worried expression, urging her not to engage in anything dangerous. Medea, undeterred, wondered if she might actually be suited for such activities, while Medea's eyes widened in shock at the maid's unexpected enthusiasm for espionage. Medea then declared that Vincent was also teaching Cheru, another maid, and emphasized the importance of friends. She asserted that she must convey the wonderfulness of the villainous to everyone, leaving Medea with a questioning, slightly overwhelmed expression. She beamed, declaring Cheru's plan to be truly wonderful, a step forward in her own grand design. Be proud, she urged. As she stepped onto a precarious wooden box, Medea continued to praise Cheru's efforts, asserting that she, the ultimate villainess, would commend her dedication. The box gave way beneath her, sending her tumbling to the ground amidst splintered wood. Tears welled in her eyes as Maid A and Vincent rushed to her side, Medea exclaiming her concern for Lady Medea. Medea quickly embraced the crying Medea, gently patting her head and urging her to look up to see something. She continued to comfort Medea, explaining that the pain had been absorbed by the stars, promising that even with unexpected events, their days would remain peaceful and pleasant. Medea then turned to gaze out the window at the night sky. As Medea remained by the window, Medea, now composed, thanked her, assuring her that she was fine. Under the vast, star-filled expanse of the night sky, a quiet exchange took place, with one voice suggesting they cool down, and another agreeing, expressing hope for an even more enjoyable day tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the village, a commotion arose as Vincent and several villagers gathered around a well, their faces etched with horror. A large, dead animal lay submerged in the water, prompting a shocked inquiry as to who could have done such a thing. The grim discovery quickly reached Medea, who listened with a concerned expression as a villager explained that a dead beast had been thrown into the well, the very well used by the Lord, and that everyone had been uneasy since morning. Medea pondered if this was a crime committed by someone with a grudge against her, the Villainous. Turning to Vincent, Medea thanked him, stating her intention to check on the situation herself later. She considered the implications of the well poisoning. While the culprit might be identified tonight, she realized the incident was likely a symptom of a larger problem. The reduction in taxes on the northern region of Reneu, a natural consequence of heavy taxation, had paradoxically become a source of discontent among the populace, weakening the Lord's position. Vincent, standing nearby, reported that they had found a lead on the perpetrator and expected to identify the mastermind by tonight. Clenching her fist, a grim realization dawned upon her. This incident was undoubtedly the beginning of an attack by malicious nobles. With a sudden, fierce smile, she declared that she would teach them what true evil truly was. Vincent looked on, a silent witness to her resolve. Meanwhile, at the Chalius Marquette in northern Reneu, a servant frantically apologized, his voice echoing through the grand estate. Inside, a male servant pleaded for leniency, explaining that this was his first mistake in 3 days of work and that his parent was ill. A maid with short hair sternly informed him that he was fired. Another maid with long hair looked on with concern. Edward, the lord, silenced the pleading servant, asking if he too wished to suffer the same fate. Edward Chalius, the current lord of the Chalius Marquette, ordered the servants to throw the man out. He asserted that the incompetent and useless should vanish from this world, believing that all results were what truly mattered. His eye narrowed, reflecting a cold, unyielding philosophy. Those who cannot produce results have no value in living. Elsewhere, a noblewoman with an elaborate hairstyle screamed in fury, lamenting that someone was not only failing their exams, but also unable to use magic properly. She wished they had never been born, condemning them as utterly useless. A hand reached for a stack of documents on a polished desk, while outside, the stark lines of a grand building stood against the night. Edward Chalius, seated at his desk, reviewed the papers, his thoughts consumed by the declining state of the land and the long-term tax rates. He pondered how other nobles might react to such policies. His mind then drifted to the young girl, wondering if she, at merely 10 years old, could truly be the orchestrator of these complex affairs. He leaned forward, his hand pressed to his temple, a troubled expression on his face. He knew that if he allowed the situation to persist, it would inevitably lead to significant complications. A subtle tension tightened his jaw, a silent resolve hardening his features. Still at his desk, he considered the reconstruction of the lineage and the reduction of taxes as a lord. He mused that if the surrounding territories were developed, other nobles would grow suspicious, potentially leading to a rebellion that he absolutely had to prevent. With a soft chime, he rang a small bell. Moments later, a bearded man entered, inquiring if he had been summoned. Edward Chalius, looking directly at him, instructed him to stage a crime, making it appear as though the Cheru family was responsible, using the corpse of a beast found within the lineage territory. Edward Chalius clasped his hands, his thoughts turning to Kyle, who was currently under pressure and likely to seek cooperation with the Chalius family. He planned to first earn Kyle's trust, then skillfully exploit his weaknesses. He dismissed the young girl as merely a child, intending to mold her into his puppet. Outside a grand estate, a carriage departed, leaving behind Edward Chalius and a male servant who stood ready to greet the arriving red-haired girl. She approached, thinking that the lineage side had indeed come to rely on Chalius. A subtle, knowing smile played on Edward Chalius's lips as he reaffirmed his intention to skillfully exploit her weaknesses. The red-haired girl smiled brightly as Edward Chalius extended his hand, welcoming her and expressing gratitude for her visit despite her busy schedule. She politely dismissed his thanks. She listened intently as Edward Chalius explained the Cheru family's esteemed history and tradition within the Magic Kingdom, emphasizing that it was an honor for her to be involved in their affairs. He spoke of the great things he wished to accomplish for her. As they continued through the opulent halls, Edward casually remarked that the Cheru family had been in decline recently, but thanks to his power, they had experienced a remarkable resurgence. He then casually remarked that his success was merely a stroke of luck, before asking her about the consultation she had sought. His tone shifted as he recounted a terrible incident. A beast's corpse had been thrown into a well in the Cheru territory, and, horrifyingly, a 10-year-old girl had been thrown in with it. The red-haired girl's eyes widened in shock. He presented a dagger, explaining that it had been crafted by a blacksmith in the Cheru territory, and further investigation confirmed the culprit was linked to the Cheru Merchant Guild. Seeing her distress, he continued, stating that given the Cheru family's prominent position in the region, he judged it best to borrow her power to resolve the situation. A subtle smile played on his lips as he thought. It worked. He told her he was honored she was relying on him and asked her to leave the matter entirely to him, internally noting that the Cheru family was indeed suspicious, just as his plan dictated. He then offered her his hand, explaining there was one more thing he wished to convey to ensure their cooperation. She looked at him, asking why. He revealed further details, explaining that in the lineage territory, there had been rumors of bribery between the lineage lord and the merchant guild, and evidence of this corruption was now leaking to the surrounding lords. The red-haired girl gasped in surprise. He elaborated on the implications, stating that if the truth came out, it would severely damage the Cheru name. To avoid provoking other lords, they should align with the surrounding territories for a while. He suggested their first step should be to adjust the tax rates in the surrounding areas. Edward Chalius, with a confident smile, spoke of the Cheru family's alleged corruption, describing their actions as shameful and unjust. He then indicated his desire to consult with someone regarding the matter. Edward then presented a stack of documents to the bearded man, inviting him to review the contents. The bearded man, upon receiving the papers, began to read them with a look of growing surprise. As the bearded man continued to read, his eyes widened in shock, and he dropped the documents in disbelief. The red-haired girl, seated nearby, smiled innocently, revealing that the papers were records from Edward's own hidden vault. He stared at the documents, his face contorted in distress, as he realized the gravity of the information. The papers detailed illegal activities, tax evasion, slave trading, and illicit drug transactions, all recorded evidence of unlawful conduct. The bearded man, looked down, deep in thought, as the red-haired girl, continued, explaining that there were many such documents. She questioned if Edward's other evidence had been thoroughly erased. She then turned to Edward, her smile widening, and remarked that he had accumulated a significant amount of wealth. She expressed her admiration for his cunning. The bearded man, clutching his chest in anguish, vehemently denied the accusations, insisting that such things were impossible. However, she calmly presented another small envelope, asking if he wished to see its contents as well. She held up a photograph, revealing it to be a commemorative picture she had taken with the vault. In the image, she and Mayday stood smiling, making peace signs, while Edward Shalius stood behind them, also smiling. The bearded man, enraged, shouted at her, demanding to know what she thought she was doing, accusing her of criminal behavior for breaking into his residence. She simply tilted her head, asking what he was talking about. She then leaned forward, a sinister smile spreading across her face, and declared that she would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. This, she asserted, was simply her way of doing things. A young woman with flowing pink hair, despite her youthful appearance, was in fact a being of immense age, having lived over a century across 3 separate reincarnations. Amidst this, a furious noblewoman, her face contorted in rage, vehemently declared that the pink-haired woman should never have been born. She continued, expressing her frustration at being labeled as incompetent and useless. However, the pink-haired woman merely smiled, asserting her true nature. She was, in fact, incredibly capable. The red-haired girl, with a mischievous smile, addressed Edward Shalius, stating that half of the money from the surrounding territory would be used for the people's livelihood. She then added that the other half would be returned to him if he listened to her. Edward, enraged, accused her of trying to make him her subordinate by exploiting his weakness. She simply affirmed his accusation, then added that he was different from a small fry like her. She then declared with a wide, confident grin that she was, after all, a true villainess. Meanwhile, Edward Shalius found himself in a dire situation, his hands bound. He realized that the 6 magic barriers around his mansion had been breached, and his security had been tight. He wondered how information about his hidden vault had leaked, suspecting an internal traitor. The red-haired girl, now seated, pondered the implications of her actions. She considered how assisting and supporting those who could not use magic, a clear act of folly against the common sense of noble society, was precisely what she needed to do. Edward, overwhelmed by the situation, sweated profusely, his eyes wide with desperation and fear. She continued, her voice calm but firm, asking if he truly believed she, a mere 10-year-old child, could have pulled off such a feat. Edward, looking utterly defeated, lowered his gaze and asked what she intended to do. With a triumphant smile, she watched as he finally conceded, stating that he understood and would obey her. She lay on the ground, basking in the aftermath of her triumph, a wide, joyful smile gracing her lips as she exclaimed how much fun it had been. Sitting up, she continued to express her immense satisfaction, declaring that another piece of the world had become hers. Vincent, standing nearby, complimented her, stating that her performance was splendid and that with her level of power, there would be no problems, especially given the tendency for hidden vaults to be established. However, Vincent's expression shifted to one of distress as he questioned if Cheru's hard work was truly worth it if it meant causing Medea pain. He elaborated, explaining that while she might seek revenge for past bullying as a commoner, he did not wish for her to hurt Medea. She, in turn, grew visibly annoyed, dismissing his concerns and emphatically stating that she did not care if Medea's stomach hurt. With a determined glint in her eyes, she declared her intention to continue her villainous path, vowing to sweep away any obstacles in her way, leaving Vincent looking increasingly troubled. Meanwhile, the narrative shifted to the grand estate of the Lyumir family, a sprawling mansion standing majestically amidst manicured grounds. Inside, Ravel Lyumir, Medea's father, stood composedly, holding a glass as a male servant delivered a grave report concerning an infection related to lineage. Ravel Lyumir, seated, expressed his weariness, observing that the world was filled with unreason and sorrow. Vincent, standing nearby, inquired if he was not well, then asked about the current state of lineage. His eyes widened in shock as he heard the news. Lady Medea had done it. Vincent continued, reporting that lineage appeared to be overcoming the infection. Ravel's gaze sharpened, a mix of surprise and concern etched on his face. He let out a soft gasp, clearly taken aback by the implications of the report. The 300 Committee had developed new types of weapons and had offered a daughter to lineage, all while claiming to be adapting everyone to magic. Ravel, ranked 12th among the 13 highest-ranking members, felt his position was precarious. He believed his aptitude should have granted him a higher standing, yet he found himself in a desperate situation, trying to protect his territory while simultaneously losing his daughter. He clenched his fist tightly, lamenting the cruel reality that magic aptitude and the value of life itself had become meaningless. Ravel reflected on the committee's actions, which included lowering taxes for those with lesser aptitude, a move that went against noble common sense. He knew he had to do something about his daughter. Just then, Vincent interrupted his thoughts, informing him that a guest was waiting and that he was busy. Ravel, still visibly troubled, instructed the male servant to show Alexis into the reception room. He made it clear that he did not wish for this matter to be discussed further. He clenched his jaw, a single thought echoing in his mind. Of all times, now? Moments later, the unexpected guest, a man with long, light hair and a composed smile, introduced himself as Alexis. He offered a polite apology for his sudden visit, then immediately stated his purpose, to discuss the ongoing experiment. He then casually remarked that it was truly regrettable that Medea, Ravel's fiancée, possessed no talent. Alexis continued, revealing his full identity as Alexis Rohenrren, a duke who held the third position within the organization that secretly controlled the Elmia Magic Kingdom, the formidable 300 Committee. He advised Ravel that it would be unwise to conceal anything from him. He then probed Ravel, asking about the status of the infection situation they had created. Ravel, maintaining his composure, confirmed that there were no problems. Alexis merely smiled, finding the response quite interesting. Alexis then revealed that his information indicated the infection problem had already been resolved. Ravel, surprised by this knowledge, questioned how he could possibly know such a thing. Alexis explained that their experiment had failed, yet despite this, Ravel's situation was progressing smoothly, which he found to be a truly mysterious story. Ravel's expression tightened with frustration. Slamming his hand on the table, Ravel vehemently denied any betrayal, asserting that it was a fact he had remained loyal. Alexis calmly acknowledged Ravel's denial, then shifted his line of questioning, suggesting the possibility that Ravel truly had no knowledge that the infection problem had been resolved. He continued, explaining that if Ravel truly hadn't known, then it was unavoidable that he couldn't save those who had been rendered meaningless. He pressed Ravel once more, asking if he truly hadn't known. Ravel looked down, deep in thought, as Alexis concluded that if he hadn't known, then it was quite a saving grace. Alexis then turned the conversation to Medea, Ravel's daughter, who was acting as the territorial lord. He noted that she had quickly gained the trust of the people by ending the infection and was now reforming taxes and land. He began by offering a formal apology for Medea's unauthorized actions, but Alexis, with a subtle, knowing smile, dismissed the sentiment. He noted that Medea was still only 10 years old, yet her accomplishments were truly remarkable. He then suggested that if she continued to be so active, they might consider inviting her to join their ranks. He continued, asserting that their organization had no need for those who lacked ability. Ravel listened intently, his expression unreadable as Alexis's words hung in the air, a clear statement of their ruthless philosophy. Maintaining his composed smile, he then suggested they should simply look forward to Medea's future endeavors, implying a keen interest in her continued success and potential. Finally, he fixed his gaze upon Ravel, stating plainly that he expected good work from him, a direct and weighty demand that left no room for misinterpretation. Days after his conversation with Lord Shalius, Vincent stood in a quiet street, lost in thought, when a voice called out his name. He turned to find himself surrounded by a group of villagers, their leaders stepping forward to express their profound gratitude. The man explained that they had heard about the monster's corpse at the gate and how the nobles were trying to use it against Medea, and they wanted to help her. The villager continued, stating that they wished to become strong enough to fight and protect Medea when the time came. He added that the surrounding lords were instead wary of her, and nothing had happened yet. Vincent listened intently, his expression unreadable. As the villager pressed on, asking if Vincent was the one responsible for the recent events, he lowered his gaze, shielding his eyes with a hand. The villager then questioned if Vincent was merely a servant, working for the nobles. Vincent remained silent, turning his back to the group. The villager, undeterred, clarified that they simply wished to convey their thanks and offer their cooperation. The villagers reiterated their desire to become Medea's allies, proclaiming their confidence in their own strength and their unwavering commitment to help the family who had saved them. Despite their earnest pleas, he continued to walk away, leaving the villagers behind as one of them called out to him, asking him to let them help. He offered a brief apology, explaining that he had work to do, and continued his solitary walk down the street, leaving the hopeful villagers watching him depart. His footsteps echoed softly on the cobblestones as he moved further away. Moments later, Vincent found himself in the company of the red-haired girl and Maid A. The girl remarked that while he might be credited for everything, he had merely provided the means, while she had taken overall command. Maid A added that the true mastermind behind the cooperation was Medea. She enthusiastically declared her readiness to do anything for Medea, a sentiment Vincent observed, noting that her motivation was indeed high. Meanwhile, Maid A, kneeling beside Vincent, asked if he truly understood what love was, mentioning that Medea sometimes seemed lonely. Maid A continued, explaining that Medea loved strawberries and wanted to eat them, and that love was born from such simple desires. She then asserted that her own devotion to Medea was absolute and could not be stopped by anything, not even the silver arm of Medea's father. As Maid A finished her passionate declaration, she looked up at Vincent, stating that she could overcome any difficulty. He responded with a quiet, almost resigned, affirmation. Vincent's thoughts drifted to Medea, wondering how such a cute girl could stretch her small body to act like an adult, finding the sight endearing. He recalled a memory of Medea, much younger, offering him a white flower, proudly calling it a present. His mind continued to wander through past interactions, remembering Medea's wide-eyed excitement as he opened a lock with a golden key, begging him to do it again. She had also admired his agent demeanor, finding his actions truly cool. Medea's voice echoed in his memory, expressing her earnest desire to become a wonderful person with a strong core, just like him. Her bright, smiling face filled his thoughts as she declared him her goal and her admiration. Overwhelmed by these vivid recollections, Vincent brought a hand to his face, a blush creeping across his cheeks. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Medea and Mayday had finished their breakfast. Mayday asked if Medea truly loved the stew, to which Medea confirmed it was her favorite. Mayday then eagerly offered to make it for her every day, a proposition Medea seemed to ponder with a slight hesitation. She, Mayday, swept the grand halls of the Lyumir estate, a gentle smile gracing her lips. Her thoughts drifted, acknowledging the profound contentment she felt. Every day is happiness, she mused, finding peace in her routine. Her thoughts then drifted to a stark contrast, a time long past. That time was so different. She recalled, remembering the period before she arrived at the Lyumir household. She had struggled immensely, unable to secure stable employment, and even when she was hired, the working conditions were often deplorable. A vivid memory surfaced of a superior's foot pressing down on her head, while Maybe stood nearby, stoically holding a suitcase. The memory continued, focusing on a harsh rejection. A man with a stern, angry expression declared, "You're not hired," his words cutting through the air, leaving her with the familiar sting of dismissal. A stern-faced employer informed the young woman that she was not hired, citing a lack of trust due to her family situation and her work ethic. Another male servant observed the exchange. The young woman's face contorted in a silent grimace of disappointment before she turned and firmly closed the door behind her, carrying her small bag. As she walked through the bustling town, she reflected on her solitary existence, determined to survive despite having no family. Soon, she arrived before the Grand Lyumir estate, a massive property that loomed before her. Inside the sprawling estate, she followed a male servant down a long, ornate corridor, her footsteps echoing softly. She internally lamented that she would likely be rejected again, but then, with a renewed sense of resolve, she decided she would simply have to do her absolute best. The male servant then explained that she would be given a trial period to demonstrate her work ethic as a day laborer. She acknowledged his words with a simple affirmation. Later, as she diligently cleaned a corridor, another woman, with long, flowing dark hair, observed her with a curious expression, noting that it was unusual to see someone cleaning the pantry at such an hour. The woman with dark hair then asked if she was taking a break, to which the maid apologized, explaining that she was simply feeling tired lately. The woman graciously told her not to worry and to continue her work. The maid continued her tasks, while the woman with dark hair remained, now seated casually on a stack of crates, her gaze still fixed upon the diligent worker. The woman with dark hair remarked on the maid's meticulousness, even in such a secluded area where no one else would notice. The maid simply acknowledged her observation. She listened intently as Cheru explained her meticulous approach to cleaning, noting that while it might take more time, it ensured a thoroughness that balanced the overall appearance of the estate. Cheru humbly added that she was not as skilled as her senior. Her expression shifted, a subtle surprise crossing her features as she considered Cheru's words. The ideal villainess quickly dismissed Cheru's apology for speaking out of turn during her trial, stating that she wished to hear more of her story instead. Cheru looked up, a question forming on her lips. She offered a gentle smile, granting Cheru permission to continue speaking while she worked. Cheru, encouraged, recounted her struggles to find employment due to her lack of family connections, expressing her determination not to give up despite the repeated rejections. She felt immense gratitude for the opportunity to share her story with the ideal villainess. Just then, Vincent approached, his expression somber as he informed the ideal villainess that, regrettably, Cheru's employment could not be approved. The ideal villainess's eyes widened slightly in response. As Vincent turned to leave, the ideal villainess called out, demanding he wait. A male servant observed the exchange from a distance, noting that the decision regarding Cheru's employment had been made from the very beginning, even before Vincent had a chance to properly assess her. She declared emphatically that Vincent could not send Cheru away, asserting her desire to hire the maid herself. Vincent looked back, startled by her unexpected intervention, while the male servant remained a silent observer. Cheru, overwhelmed, bowed deeply, apologizing profusely for her perceived rudeness towards the mistress. The ideal villainess, however, simply dismissed her apologies, assuring her it was fine. The ideal villainess turned her gaze towards the male servant, who began to speak, his words trailing off into a hesitant murmur. She had intervened to hire Cheru, and now, overwhelmed with emotion, the young maid tearfully asked why she had been chosen. Her question was met with a calm explanation from the ideal villainess, who, seated regally amidst her attendants, declared that she desired a trustworthy maid. She elaborated that many of the servants in the mansion were already entangled in various schemes and interests, making genuine loyalty a rare and valuable commodity. Having heard Cheru's honest confession about her past struggles, the ideal villainess acknowledged her candor. She remarked that Cheru had spoken truthfully, even about things that put her at a disadvantage, a quality she clearly valued. Cheru, now smiling brightly and holding a broom, seemed to have found her place. Later, or perhaps in another facet of her intricate plans, the ideal villainess addressed another maid, a stern-faced woman with short, light hair. She revealed that there was a child she wished to entrust to her care. Cheru, the maid, looks on with a surprised and slightly distressed expression, a thought forming in her mind. My daughter. She then reflects on the ideal villainess, thinking that such a wonderful mistress must surely be a splendid person. The ideal villainess smiles gently, seemingly unaware of Cheru's internal musings. However, a memory surfaces, revealing a younger Medea throwing a furious tantrum, screaming that she would not eat this kind of thing because it was not delicious at all. She demanded the meal be remade without vegetables and insisted on having dessert first. Cheru, in the memory, responds with a meek, resigned yes. Despite this memory, Cheru stands before the ideal villainess, asserting her unwavering loyalty. She declares that she will bear the hardships and serve with utmost sincerity, comparing the repeated interviews to reaching heaven. The ideal villainess listens, her expression composed. The narrative then shifts, chronicling a significant change. Medea changed around the time she turned 5 years old. Cheru is shown observing the young Medea, who appears to be in a state of contemplation. The young girl, Medea, is seen crying, her eyes filled with tears, as she asks Cheru if she would still stay by her side, even if she were not good. Cheru looks at her with a mixture of concern and tenderness. Returning to the present, Cheru addresses the ideal villainess, explaining that Medea has been very helpful lately. The ideal villainess appears surprised by this revelation, questioning, Medea? Cheru then chuckles, remarking that Medea is always so broad-minded and never wrong in her actions. She continues, explaining to the ideal villainess, who is now resting in bed, that Medea helped her today and even drew a picture for her. Cheru adds that Medea is diligently studying hard even underground. Cheru smiles brightly, addressing her mistress with warmth. The ideal villainess, lying in bed with her eyes closed, hears Cheru apologize for waking her. She responds softly, confirming that she was already awake. The ideal villainess rested peacefully, her eyes closed, as Cheru watched over her with a gentle smile. She then asked Cheru to tell her more about Medea, stating that the girl's well-being was her sole joy in life. Cheru, standing beside the bed, respectfully affirmed her understanding, ready to continue her account. A soft light illuminated the ideal villainess's serene face as she continued to rest, listening intently. Cheru offered a warm, closed-eyed smile, her expression reflecting a deep contentment. Moments later, Cheru walked down a long, sunlit hallway, carrying a bucket, her duties calling her away from the bedside. Her expression, however, had shifted to one of slight concern, a subtle worry clouding her features. As she looked out a window, a young girl with vibrant red-haired girl, burst into view, excitedly declaring that the plan had entered its second phase and that they were acting to change the world this very evening. Cheru, still smiling gently, acknowledged the girl, referring to her as mistress, while red-haired girl, beaming, added that everything was going according to the grand plan and that the world was about to fall into her hands. She seemed to be enjoying herself immensely. The reforms of the territory and its lands continued to advance. Edward, by utilizing the hidden assets of Charlius, successfully suppressed the rebellion against Charlius's fiefdom and established a system to provide work and food distribution to the poor. These efforts, which included employing those who had no land to cultivate, led to improved public order and stability in Charlius's domain. However, not everyone in aristocratic society viewed these measures favorably. Whispers of criticism against Miela's policies were rising within the Third Council of the Magic Kingdom. She listened to the report, acknowledging that the council was also planning an inquiry into her actions. The timing, she mused, was earlier than she had anticipated. Miela considered the implications, understanding that the decision of a council where powerful nobles from the eastern regions gathered held significant weight and could not be ignored, even by royalty. She resolved to deal with it decisively. Her advisor then revealed that the central figure behind this opposition was none other than Count Shanghai. Miela, her expression serious, immediately inquired of her butler, asking for more information about this individual. The advisor explained that Count Shanghai was one of the most influential figures in the Third Council, a noble from the eastern region with immense reputation and power. He emphasized that their own status as frontier nobles was vastly different from his, implying that making an enemy of him would not be advantageous. Miela absorbed the information, a subtle, knowing smile gracing her lips. She had made her decision, informing her advisor that the next target was set. He seemed surprised, asking if it was truly so. With a confident, almost predatory smile, she declared that they would engage Count Shanghai and the Third Council in their own game, certain that she would emerge victorious. Meanwhile, in the town square, a group of villagers trained vigorously, shouting their resolve to protect their home. Others observed, wondering aloud if they, the common folk, could truly be of use to their lord. One of them clenched his fist in frustration, a silent question hanging in the air as the group continued their arduous training. Why did they feel so powerless? 2 months had passed since that day, and the villagers continued their relentless training, ready to answer any call, their efforts unwavering. Despite their dedication, one villager lamented that neither Vincent nor Miela had called upon them. He questioned what they lacked, what more they needed to do, expressing his confusion and frustration. Another villager added that directly asking for work would make it seem as though they were demanding a reward for their efforts. He felt they couldn't claim to be strong if they had no special skills, doubting their own capabilities. Just as their morale wavered, a figure appeared, calling out to them. He urged them to stop their self-pity, asserting that if they truly desired to help, they had no choice but to continue striving. He then approached the group, informing them that their earnest efforts had been acknowledged. With that, he presented them with a uniform, instructing them to change into it. The villagers, including the strong man, looked on in surprise, questioning if they were truly meant to change. He stood before the assembled villagers, who now wore the uniforms he had provided. Holding up a piece of dark fabric, he declared that this was their new work. His gaze sharpened as he continued, explaining that their new purpose was to serve and work directly under Lady Miela. He emphasized the critical nature of their role, stating that it was a necessary position, one befitting their recent training and dedication. As he observed the villagers erupting in cheers, raising their fists and shouting his name in gratitude, a thought crossed his mind. Perhaps they would also require education in proper speech. Vincent, with a serious expression, presented a formidable group of men in dark suits and sunglasses to Miela, declaring them to be the collaborators for their current operation. Miela's eyes widened in surprise. Her surprise was evident, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of the new arrivals. Vincent then turned his gaze to the assembled agents, one of whom inquired if there was an issue. He simply replied, "No." Meanwhile, Miela's expression shifted to one of delight, a wide smile gracing her lips as she thought to herself that these individuals looked as if they had stepped right out of a spy novel. As she continued to observe the line of agents, one of them questioned their origin, asking where such a large group of agents had come from. Miela, still curious, let out a small sound of inquiry. Suddenly, Miela pointed with an excited gasp, recognizing a detail from a past event. An agent confirmed her realization, stating, "That's right." In the background, a man in a lab coat screamed, collapsing as if struck down. Miela, seemingly unfazed by the chaos, then remarked, "As expected of Vincent." She then turned to Vincent, who smiled subtly as he adjusted his glasses. He explained that while their current strength was still insufficient, he intended to conduct rapid training for them. Miela's eyes widened in disbelief, a thought forming in her mind. "No way." Vincent, adjusting his tie with a calm demeanor, continued to speak, revealing his intention to establish an intelligence organization. The agent stood silently behind him, awaiting his command. Miela, her expression now fierce and determined, declared that she would not be outdone and would become a perfect villainess. She thanked Vincent for acknowledging her, assuring him that she had received his enthusiasm. With a resolute gaze, she then proclaimed, "Let's begin the splendid assassination." In the distance, Vincent appeared taken aback by her sudden declaration. Under the cover of night, Miela, Vincent, and the assembled agents gathered in a forest clearing. Vincent began to outline their mission, explaining that their first target was Marquis Kudu, a figure with deep connections to the Third Council. As Miela processed the mission, she observed Vincent presenting documents. He explained that these were materials on Marquis Kudu's illicit funding, obtained with great effort. He then instructed that for this mission, they would infiltrate the mansion disguised as servants. He continued, revealing that the documents were originally from the Empire's secret intelligence agency. With these, they would secure a safe route for their operation. Miela listened intently, while Vincent, seemingly overwhelmed by the implications, covered his face with his hand. Meanwhile, a new figure, a woman with a confident smile, approached. Vincent explained that they would use a magic blocking device to partially disable the magical barriers surrounding the target's estate. The woman, addressing Vincent as Shell San, declared that as his senior, she would show him how it was done. Miela, looking up at the woman, seemed to recognize her, murmuring "Shell Senpai." With the preparations complete, the infiltration began. The scene shifted to a dimly lit, opulent hallway within the target's mansion, its grand windows draped in heavy curtains, suggesting the late hour. Elsewhere, Vincent adjusted his tie, a thoughtful expression on his face. He mused aloud that the Third Council remained unchanged, constantly being manipulated. He then turned and opened a large wardrobe, preparing for the next stage of their plan. Moments later, Miela, now dressed in a more elaborate, dark gown, emerged from a doorway, accompanied by Shell and another agent. Vincent, observing their entrance, greeted them, noting it was a good night for their mission. Miela looked directly forward, a subtle, knowing smile playing on her lips, her eyes gleaming with a chilling resolve. Suddenly, Vincent cried out in alarm, his eyes wide with shock, demanding to know where something had come from. Miela and Shell stood behind him, their expressions unreadable, as a loud sound effect indicated a sudden, startling event. He recoiled, paper scattering from his grasp as a furious voice boomed, demanding to know who they were. Miela, disguised as a maid, simply smiled, placing a finger to her lips, urging silence. The man, Marquis Kudu, continued to speak, his words echoing as Vincent stared down at the documents now strewn across the floor. His eyes widened in sudden understanding as he recognized the nature of the documents, records of illegal loans. Just then, Miela stepped forward, her smile wide and innocent, confirming that these were indeed the proofs of Kudu's illicit dealings. Kudu, stunned, questioned if she intended to expose him. Miela, her expression now serious, admitted that she had considered it, but also understood his circumstances. He then confessed that the Marquis side of the family was not inherently bad, but had been cornered and forced into these unsavory dealings. He expressed his understanding of her pain. Miela, her gaze distant, revealed that her own father was suffering in a remote borderland, afflicted by a plague, implying a shared plight. She then knelt before him, a gesture that surprised both Kudu and Vincent, as she declared her intention to restore her ruined land. With a sly smile, she offered him a deal. If he could grant her wish, she would keep his secrets. She asked if he wished to protect his family and himself, leaving him to ponder what he should do. Vincent, watching, clenched his fist. Her gaze then shifted to Vincent, her smile unwavering as she declared her ultimate goal, to become a friend of the Third Council. She hoped for a kind friend who would listen to all her requests. Vincent looked away, his expression troubled. Miela_1 sat thoughtfully at a table laden with tea and pastries, contemplating the implications of the lower nobility's actions. As she delicately sipped her tea, Vincent_1 stood beside her, explaining that a meeting was planned in 3 weeks. He detailed how the reduction in taxes had caused widespread dissatisfaction in other regions, and that the objective was to restrict Miela_1's movements, as they had previously managed to raise taxes without issue. Miela_1's expression grew serious as she considered the unfolding situation, her gaze distant. Meanwhile, Vincent_1 continued his report to Miela_1 and Advisor_1, stating that the problem lay with the Marquis Kudu's faction, which remained unbroken. He added that they had been unable to locate any hidden evidence. Miela_1 then requested to hear Edward's account. Vincent_1 clarified that Marquis Kudu was indeed a brilliant noble of the Magic Kingdom, but he was not without his weaknesses. He then smiled confidently, assuring Miela_1 that he had gained Kudu's trust and would provide internal information. He believed Kudu held him in high regard, just as he himself valued Kudu. Suddenly, Butler_1, Edward, entered the room, announcing with a decisive gesture that he had already taken action. Miela_1 looked surprised, holding a document in her hands, and asked what was written within. Butler_1 instructed her to wait, promising to open it for her. Her expression hardened with resolve as she stated that she now understood their intentions. Miela_1 then offered a sly smile, realizing that Kudu was wary of her brilliance, seeing her as a superior master. She lamented that, unfortunately, she would not get another chance to observe him. She dismissed the attendant, instructing him that it was fine for him to leave and that the back entrance was the way out. The attendant, surprised, called out her name, Miela-sama. Meanwhile, the grand residence of Marquis Fahrenheit stood, an imposing structure amidst manicured grounds. Within its walls, Marquis Kudu pondered, a thoughtful hand resting on his chin. He mused about a small bee buzzing around, and a clever imitation that had been made, wondering what would come of it. An agent, cloaked in dark fabric, relayed a message to an associate. The Council of 300 intended to request Miela's removal. The Marquis, a cigar held between his fingers, confirmed his original intention to crush her at the Third Council, confident that his preparations were already complete. However, he then told his cloaked agent that his current efforts were not enough, and presented a briefcase, instructing them to use this. The briefcase, now open, revealed stacks of gleaming coins, a clear indication of the resources at his disposal. Kudu continued to strategize, acknowledging that Miela was indeed defying the Council of 300, but he believed the organization would not move quickly enough to protect her. He warned his agent not to fall behind. The cloaked agent then questioned if Kudu intended to quickly eliminate the nuisance without getting his own hands dirty. The Marquis, with a knowing look, simply stated it was a good opportunity and told the agent to leave it to me. With a sinister smile, Marquis Kudu declared his unwavering resolve. He would eliminate Miela by any means necessary. Miela, holding a document, gasped in surprise. The Third Council had issued a summons, and it was for today. She questioned the suddenness of the summons, stating it was supposed to be 3 weeks later. Vincent explained that even Marquis Kudu had not been informed beforehand. Miela, deep in thought, realized that this meant the upper echelons of the Third Council, a small number of individuals, must have forced this decision. Her expression hardened as she considered that a significant, hidden force must be at play, shifting policies behind the scenes. Despite Vincent's concern that preparations were not yet complete, she declared that she did not mind and would take the bait. She explained her strategy, asserting that if they revised their plan and met the conditions for victory, winning was entirely possible. She instructed them not to flee, but to face the challenge head-on. A determined, almost mischievous smile spread across her face as she vowed to make the wicked nobles cry out in defeat. Meanwhile, at Elmia Palace, a quill pen lay on a desk, ink splattered, suggesting a recent, urgent signing or decree. Inside the palace, a cloaked figure stood before Marquis Kudu, who, seated at a grand desk, questioned if the Third Council had summoned Myrsha for an inquiry. He then erupted in anger, demanding to know why the report was late, emphasizing the need to be informed of any movement, as the nobles were already acting with extreme caution. He slammed his fist onto the desk, his voice booming as he demanded the report for the afternoon. He questioned the delay, finding it utterly inexplicable that a usually excellent subordinate had failed to deliver it on time. Something was clearly amiss. His thoughts continued to race, considering the possibility that a powerful, hidden group might be attempting to eliminate Miela. He acknowledged her noble status, yet saw her as a significant threat, a pawn to be removed by these shadowy figures. He reflected on Miela's youth, barely 10 years old, yet already possessing the political acumen to challenge the Third Council's decisions and the very notion of aristocratic supremacy. Such a presence was clearly an anomaly, and he resolved that she absolutely had to be stopped. With a grim expression, he declared her the very hope of their nation, though the words carried a chilling undertone, hinting at a darker interpretation of her role. Still seething, he turned to his agent, ordering an immediate departure for Ulfin. He then commanded that the second prince be made to suffer the greatest torment in human history, a hellish agony, during their scheduled meeting. Meanwhile, Miela rode in a carriage, her brow furrowed in thought. She pondered which hair ornament would best suit her, specifically wondering which one would make her appear more like a villainess. She wished for a slightly longer ribbon, then beamed with a sudden realization, confirming her choice. Vincent, standing nearby, suggested that a black ribbon would indeed complement her dark dress perfectly. Despite her daily efforts, hanging from a bar and drinking a beverage, she lamented that she still hadn't grown taller. She looked up at Vincent, who stood beside her, a silent question hanging between them. She then observed the unusual stillness of the forest, noting the eerie absence of sounds from birds or beasts. She pondered the unsettling quiet of the forest, questioning if it was truly empty. The profound silence struck her as unnatural, leading her to conclude that if no one remained, then something in the vicinity must have been alerted and subsequently fled. A carriage sped along a forest road, carrying Miela_1 and Vincent_1. Suddenly, Advisor_1, riding alongside, urgently shouted for the driver to stop. Miela_1's eyes widened, a flicker of alarm crossing her face as the urgent command reached her. The carriage halted, and Miela_1 realized a complex magic circle had been etched into the ground, indicating a powerful spell had been cast. Stepping out of the carriage, Miela_1 watched as Vincent_1 knelt to examine the intricate markings. He quickly deduced that this was a large-scale magic, and an ancient relic was being used as its medium. Vincent_1 rose, his expression grim, and warned Miela_1 that she might be the target of this elaborate trap. He suggested they turn back immediately. Miela_1 listened, her brow furrowed in thought. Before they could act, a sudden, guttural sound echoed through the forest, startling Miela_1, who cried out, questioning its origin. Both Miela_1 and Vincent_1 looked up, their gazes fixed on the sky as the ominous rumbling intensified. Vincent_1's eyes widened in horror as a colossal shadow descended from above, revealing the true nature of the threat. From the sky, a massive, dragon-like creature, its scales glinting, plunged towards them with terrifying speed. As the creature's immense claw extended, poised to strike, Miela_1 stood her ground, her expression shifting from fear to resolute determination. She stared in disbelief at the colossal creature before them. It was a dragon, a fire dragon, its immense form radiating heat and power. The sheer scale of the beast indicated a disaster-level threat, and the magic required to summon such a high-level entity suggested a formidable opponent. She realized that this was no mere accident. Someone intended to make it appear as if they had been attacked by a monster. As the implications settled, she felt herself being lifted, a small sound of confusion escaping her lips. He held her close, explaining his plan to draw the fire dragon's attention away. He then entrusted her safety to Vincent, urging him not to worry. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and resolve, asserting that she, Miela, was the hope of this defeated nation. He met her gaze with unwavering resolve, declaring that he would protect her, no matter the means. Despite his words, she struggled against the butler's grasp, shouting Vincent's name and protesting that they couldn't simply abandon her. Still, he continued to move away, leaving her in the butler's arms as the carriage began to pull away. She cried out his name again, pleading with him not to sacrifice himself. The butler, holding her firmly, insisted that she must be put down, reminding her that a human was no match for a fire dragon. Her eyes narrowed, a fierce determination hardening her expression as she wondered if her orders had not been heard. She struggled against the butler's grip, her frustration evident as he held her back. He pleaded with her, calling out her name and urging her to wait, while Vincent continued to run further into the distance, leaving them behind. Miela_1's face was etched with despair as she acknowledged the grim truth. Her aptitude lay solely in life magic, rendering her powerless in direct combat. The enemy, she realized, wielded summoning magic, controlling a formidable fire dragon. She continued to run, the vast disparity in their powers painfully evident, yet a flicker of defiance remained within her. Despite the overwhelming odds, she declared inwardly that she was not afraid. She had always, without fail, overcome the most challenging circumstances, a testament to her unwavering resolve. With a newfound, fierce determination, she resolved to become the most formidable and captivating villainess the world had ever known. Amidst the smoldering ruins, a cloaked figure stood, its back to the viewer, facing Vincent, who remained a solitary silhouette in the ravaged landscape. Vincent, observing the destruction, questioned aloud what the Marquis's butler could possibly accomplish in such a dire situation. In response, the hooded figure extended a hand, and from the swirling chaos, the massive fire dragon emerged, unleashing a torrent of flames. Vincent moved with swift precision, dodging the fiery assault as debris exploded around him. The cloaked figure let out a chilling laugh, mockingly urging Vincent to flee. Vincent, however, merely glanced back, his expression unreadable. As the hood fell back, the face of the Marquis's butler was revealed, his eyes sharp and determined, a stark contrast to his usual composed demeanor. Still cloaked, he observed Vincent, noting that a normal mage would have been killed by now. He mused that Vincent had managed to avoid carelessness by not revealing his full strength. Vincent, in turn, acknowledged that his opponent was formidable. As the confrontation continued, Kudu_agent_1 mocked Vincent's attempt to buy time and protect his master, calling it truly admirable. He then declared that even if Vincent managed to prepare, there would still be countless opportunities to kill him, all while the fire dragon roared and attacked. With a decisive gesture, Kudu_agent_1 commanded the dragon to deliver the final blow. The massive creature unleashed a torrent of fire and energy, engulfing Vincent in a blinding explosion. The sheer force of the attack caused Kudu_agent_1's hood to fall back, revealing his face, contorted in a grimace of exertion and perhaps a hint of surprise. Vincent, now on the ground, reached out a hand, his gaze fixed on Miela_1, who was fleeing into the distance. He seemed to be calling out to her, a desperate plea escaping his lips. The ground beneath them shattered and erupted from the immense magical impact, sending shockwaves through the forest. Kudu_Agent_1 stood amidst the debris, the ground around him torn apart, his arms still extended from the powerful spell he had just cast. A woman with dark, curly hair angrily berated someone, declaring that they were utterly useless and couldn't even use magic properly. She wished they had never been born. A hooded figure stood resolute amidst a maelstrom of energy, facing a colossal, winged reptilian beast that descended upon them. Despite the overwhelming force, the figure's boots remained firmly planted on the shattered earth, unyielding. His gaze, though partially hidden by the deep hood, betrayed a fierce resolve, even as the surrounding power seemed to buffet him. Elsewhere, long, flowing hair cascaded around a young woman, her ornate dress hinting at her presence nearby. She stood with a serious, almost distressed expression, her wide eyes fixed on something unseen. Moments later, Miela_1 stood over the hooded figure, who lay on the ground. She expressed disbelief, noting that he appeared completely unharmed despite the immense attack. He remained on the ground, his thoughts racing. He had not deployed any defensive magic, nor any barriers. He then realized something profound about basic magic, specifically the spell for giving water to plants, which he had been researching. Miela_1 then elaborated on her own abilities, explaining that by combining the magic to make small things float, with the spell for fixing the position of water, she could achieve an entirely different effect. She then asked him, with a chilling intensity, if he was aware that a single cup of water could drown someone. The hooded figure gasped, clutching at his throat in sudden agony. He continued to struggle, desperately gasping that he could not breathe, while Miela_1 stood impassively above him. As the hooded figure struggled for air, Miela_1 began to explain her method, detailing how she first created a thin wall of water. Then, she continued, she deployed the water, making it appear to miss its target, thus avoiding any counterattack. Finally, she revealed, she fixed the water's position around the mage's throat. She explained that because the opponent mistook her life magic for unknown magic, they were easily deceived. Vincent, kneeling nearby, praised her ingenuity. He looked at her, surprised by her cunning, and remarked that her daily efforts to devise such clever strategies were truly admirable. She then declared with fierce determination that she would never abandon her comrades. She admitted she was not kind to her enemies, but within her heart, she aimed to be the strongest villainess. She continued, urging him to take care of himself, because he was her partner. Leaning in closer, she emphatically promised that she would help him, no matter what it took. He listened, his expression shifting to one of deep contemplation. Her patience wearing thin, she demanded to know if he was listening. He responded with a gentle, knowing smile. He looked down at her, addressing her formally as Lady Media. She met his gaze, offering a confident yes in response. The chronicler noted that even the most formidable agents would prove no match for this particular villainess. The city bustled with activity, its grand architecture standing tall under the clear sky. Preparations were underway for the Third Council meeting, an event of significant importance. Further within the city, the majestic Third Council meeting hall stood prominently, its wide steps leading to an imposing entrance. Figures moved towards it, their silhouettes growing smaller against the grand facade. Inside, a group of men, including an advisor, urgently called out for Media Lumiel, demanding to know her whereabouts. One of them expressed surprise at her absence. Meanwhile, the second prince, clad in an ornate uniform, stood with a stern yet thoughtful expression. Behind him, Vincent observed the unfolding events, as someone nearby questioned if it was truly His Highness. He watched the commotion, his mind racing with the impending questioning conference. He knew he had to inform her before it began, sensing a dangerous trap lay ahead. As he pondered this, an imposing old man with a long white beard, a monocle, and a cane approached him, addressing him with a respectful yet firm tone as Your Highness. The second prince turned, his gaze sharp and serious, preparing to hear what the elder had to say. He questioned the suddenness of the questioning conference, pointing out that Media was still only 10 years old and her territory had no issues. The old man, however, dismissed his concerns, stating that Media's actions were a grave misunderstanding that went against the country's laws, making it impossible to overlook. The old man continued, explaining that Media, as a proxy lord, had always been considered inferior. He asserted that those like her could not use magic and were therefore deemed worthless in this country. The second prince's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of frustration and determination at the old man's harsh judgment. He listened as the old man continued his scathing assessment, declaring that the prince might be an enemy to their nation. The old man then spoke of a deeper truth, suggesting that the prince's thoughts extended beyond what he perceived, hinting at a girl he wished to protect, a girl who might not even exist in this world. The old man then challenged him, questioning if he truly understood the implications of his actions. The prince, however, had already grasped the grim reality. The council meeting was nothing more than a pretense, a trap laid for him from the very beginning. As the prince processed this, the old man offered a final, chilling piece of advice. He should be cautious and avoid stirring up unnecessary trouble. He looked down, his expression heavy with a profound realization. She had been his hope. His mind drifted, recalling a time when he, Media, and his advisor moved in secret, cloaked figures amidst a dense forest, their faces obscured by hoods. He remembered Media, unlike other nobles, engaging warmly with commoners and her own retinue, her presence a beacon of genuine connection. She smiled brightly, holding a basket of fresh produce, surrounded by her smiling supporters and villagers. He believed that if anyone could change this country, it was her. Back in the present, the prince, still cloaked, wore a troubled expression, while his hooded advisor beside him offered a knowing, subtle smile. His thoughts returned to Media's sparkling hair, a vivid image of her unique spirit. His eyes snapped open, wide with a fierce determination, reflecting a newfound resolve. He watched Media, who offered a gentle smile, her demeanor composed despite the underlying tension. His own expression, however, betrayed a deep concern for her. Miela, with a confident smile, thanked the older man for preparing such a splendid path for her. The old man, observing her, seemed to find her enjoyment of the situation quite intriguing. She continued, explaining that keeping her dress clean during the journey had been quite a challenge, but she eagerly anticipated the upcoming interrogation. The old man listened intently, his expression unreadable. As they spoke, the second prince approached, interrupting their conversation with an apology for his intrusion. Miela turned her head slightly to acknowledge him. He quickly dismissed his own interruption, indicating it was of no consequence. He then told her not to concern herself with him. His back turned as Miela looked at him with a thoughtful expression. After their brief exchange, Miela walked away with her butler, while the second prince continued in the opposite direction, their paths diverging. Soon, the scene shifted to a grand council chamber, filled with numerous officials and dignitaries seated in a circular arrangement, all awaiting the proceedings. Within the chamber, Miela sat at the head of the assembly, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She inwardly mused that it was good to see the second prince's surprised face, recalling how she had wondered what would happen when the wyvern was unleashed. Her thoughts then turned to the present, expressing relief that she was not skilled in washing clothes. Meanwhile, the old man observed the second prince, realizing he was in disguise, a fact Miela seemed to have overlooked. She reflected on the second prince, disguised as a commoner, yet his voice was undeniably the same. He had been looking at her with such a hateful gaze earlier, a truly awful prince. She resolved to avoid any further involvement with him. Meanwhile, the old man, feeling the oppressive heat in the council chamber, questioned if the venue was quite warm today. The butler, carrying a tray of drinks, apologized, explaining that the ventilator was malfunctioning. The butler then offered cold beverages, and the old man, acknowledging the gesture, urged him to resolve the issue with the ventilator quickly. The third committee chairman, the old man, then announced the start of the meeting, declaring that everyone had been summoned to discuss Miela's tyrannical policies and the renewal efforts she had undertaken. He instructed them to review the provided materials. Miela listened intently. His thoughts detailed the accusations, forced labor, aggressive land development, and the utilization of surrounding areas of unknown origin, all considered in the context of stability. Another council member, his face contorted in anger, vehemently argued that her reckless policies had led to public dissatisfaction, declining tax revenues, and a deterioration of public order. He asserted that as patriots, they could not simply overlook her tyrannical actions, even if she was incapable of using magic. The old man thanked Baron Alonso for his input, and then addressed Miela directly, instructing her to await their deliberation on her punishment. He further reminded her that the Magic Kingdom's administrative law, Article 21, explicitly recognized the right to interrogate the accused in a magic council. Miela's expression remained serious as she absorbed his words. Miela, however, offered a subtle, knowing smile, asking if it was truly the act of a patriot to break the law. She listened as Baron Alonso, addressing the council, stated that if there were any opinions regarding the previous answer, they should be voiced. He then requested a thorough investigation into the facts, specifically concerning the dissatisfaction in his territory and the deterioration of public order. He questioned whether the data gathered by her subordinates was objective and reliable. He continued, mentioning that there were travel records for the northern side of lineage and asking if there was any record of the person in question. To ensure fairness, he explained, he had conducted his own investigation with his subordinates, concluding that he simply did not understand the situation. Miela, with a confident smile, countered that the northern towns were not her territory, as many people came and went. She asserted that she had personally inspected the area, and any outsider who bothered to ask the residents would surely understand the situation. She implied his caution was excessive. She further elaborated that she possessed a different capability than he did, allowing her to conduct reliable investigations without needing to visit the site herself. As proof, she presented a survey with 2,000 signed responses, proudly stating that 96% of them approved of her policies. Baron Alonso, his face contorted in anger, vehemently rejected her claims, shouting that the data presented was not credible because it had been compiled by individuals who had not visited the actual locations. Miela, her expression hardening, sharply commanded him to be silent. She then offered a slight, knowing smile, acknowledging his outburst and stating that she now understood the situation clearly. Meanwhile, a group of shadowy figures observed the proceedings from a hidden vantage point. One of them remarked that the outcome of this interrogation meeting had been decided from the very beginning, and even if the chairman and all council members were to voice their true opinions, the predetermined situation would not change. Miela, her earlier confidence replaced by a look of distress, realized the futility of resistance. She understood that the supposed plague had ended, and those who had been isolated in poor environments were merely being quarantined, a chilling revelation. Her thoughts continued, drifting to the many people who had fled her territory in lineage. She pondered how her father had been forced to avoid the unreasonable demands of the Lumiere family, murmuring his name softly to herself. As she looked up, observing Baron Alonso and the other council members, a new realization dawned upon her. Perhaps her father was trying to save her after all. A sudden, sharp realization cut through her thoughts, and she cried out a name, almost a whisper. Tia. Media, seated at her desk, looked up with an intense gaze, demanding attention. Are you listening, Media Raimiru? Her expression hardened as she continued, stating that the first step towards their reformation was for everyone present to offer their apologies. She then countered, asserting that no apology was necessary from her. On the contrary, she believed she was owed an apology, considering the far-reaching accusations and the outrageous beginning of this entire situation. With a subtle turn, a sly, almost menacing smile touched her lips as she warned that if she were to apologize, she might inadvertently retaliate against everyone present. The council members reacted with a mixture of shock and outrage, some exclaiming at the mention of retaliation. Media, her smile widening, then questioned how a mere child like herself could possibly enact such a thing, finding their apprehension quite mysterious. Meanwhile, a mechanical fan whirred inefficiently, and a tray of cold drinks sat nearby. A voice questioned why the fan was malfunctioning specifically today, and who had been responsible for distributing the chilled beverages. Among the assembled, two council members conversed, one questioning whether everyone present could truly be trusted. Without warning, a wave of dizziness and collapse swept through the assembly. Many council members clutched their heads, their bodies giving out as they fell from their seats. Media stood calmly, observing the unfolding chaos with an almost amused expression. The old man, now visibly distressed, exclaimed in shock. She simply remarked that everyone seemed quite tired. With a wide, triumphant smile, Media looked down upon the collapsed council members. She declared that when they finally awakened, the situation would be irreversible and advised them to rest easy. She sat calmly, a teacup held delicately in her hand, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips as she surveyed the room. Moments later, she stood beside Vincent, who offered his thanks for her efforts. Around them, the other council members lay unconscious on the floor. Their meeting abruptly concluded. She then turned to an advisor, explaining that she had cleared the meeting hall and made it a private chamber for her purposes. She noted that Shell and her agents were also gathering information and heading her way. She continued, declaring that she would become a splendid villainess, her words carrying a chilling resolve. With a confident, almost gleeful expression, she announced her intention to seize control of the Third Council. Elsewhere, Baron Alonso, now bound and gagged, grimaced, his face contorted in a mixture of anger and frustration. She stood before him, a triumphant smile on her face, as he struggled against his bonds, demanding to know what she had put in his drink and accusing her of using dirty tricks against the proud noble of the Magic Kingdom. She calmly presented him with a document, explaining that it contained irrefutable evidence of his proud corruption. She informed him that, given the scale of his transgressions, he would face a 10-year sentence in a magic prison. She leaned in, her expression softening slightly, and offered him a choice. If he would listen to what she had to say, she, being a kind person, would allow him to remain silent. She added that for a proud noble like him, the most common way to deal with such a situation. Baron Alonso, his eyes narrowed, listened intently. He recognized the brilliance of her strategy, a masterful move to corner him without her own hands getting dirty, using her subordinates and allies to press her advantage. Baron Alonso, still bound, faced Media, who smiled sweetly. She acknowledged his past actions but declared that this time, he had chosen the wrong opponent. He responded with a dismissive grunt. She then presented him with documents, revealing irrefutable evidence of his 2 decades of tax evasion, a revelation that would undoubtedly turn the royal family against him. He scoffed at her, asserting that such childish tactics would never truly expose him or bring him down. She countered, her expression hardening, explaining that she possessed the means to erase all traces of evidence, making it impossible for him to escape. She added that she could even make his capable right-hand man disappear, causing him significant trouble. He looked on in shock as she snapped her fingers, revealing her knowledge of his deepest secret. He was merely a human who cherished his granddaughter above all else. Vincent stood silently behind her. The scene shifted to a young girl, Priscilla, lying unconscious and bound on the floor, her hair ribbon askew. He erupted in fury, demanding to know what Media had done to his beloved granddaughter, calling her a despicable wretch.